Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. And by different, I mean you're about to get absolutely destroyed by the Roman Empire. Like, within hours, maybe minutes. There was no sugarcoating this. Ancient Rome is not your cozy Pinterest aesthetic. It's hot, loud, brutal, and deeply uninterested in your survival. You think you'd make it? Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and the time you're watching in the comments. I want to know who's brave enough to face Rome with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake on a dusty stone road. There's no pavement, no cars, just sandals slapping on uneven cobblestones, and the pungent scent of wet straw and human sweat. All around you, tunic-wearing Romans push past without a second glance, muttering in Latin, dragging carts shouting prices. You're barefoot, half-dressed in a weird combination of modern clothes and confusion and, oh no, your phone has zero signal. The crowd thickens and pushes you toward a fountain surrounded by cracked marble. A child points at your shoes and laughs. You have no idea where you are, but judging by the lack of plumbing, deodorant and personal space, you've been dropped smack into the height of the Roman Empire, somewhere around 117 CE, during the reign of Emperor Trajan. Within 10 minutes, you're already sweating, not just from heat, it's anxiety. You know the empire is at its peak, stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. Roads connect everything, legions keep order, and emperors rule with that smile or sword energy, but none of that helps you right now. You're just a foreigner in a time where foreigners are either traded, enslaved, or blamed for something. Your shorts alone are enough to startle the locals, and you're pretty sure the AirPods in your pocket just labelled you a minor god, or a demon. You try to ask someone for help, big mistake. The man selling figs just stares at you like you barked at him. You stammer something else, and he makes a disgusted face before spitting at your feet. Right, Latin. That's a thing. You shuffle away, trying to avoid more attention, but your weird tunic shorts situation is catching eyes, and not the good kind. You duck down a side street and are immediately hit with a wall of stink. Rotting vegetables, something possibly dead, and a stream of what you desperately hope is just water trickling down the gutter. You press yourself against a building, trying to get your bearings, but that's when a group of kids notices you. They start shouting, laughing at your strange clothes, your panicked face, your obvious lack of clue. One chucks a fig. It misses, barely. There are no signs, no helpful "you are here" kiosks, just sandstone walls, cracked mosaics, and a looming sense that you're not supposed to be here. A man with a big nose and bigger arms barks something at you. You nod because it seems safer than not nodding. He squints, confused, then shrugs and walks off, lucky. Somewhere in the distance, horns blare. Not music, some kind of announcement. People shuffle toward the forum, curious. You follow, figuring maybe there's help, maybe someone official. Bad call. The forum is packed, and a bald man on a platform is yelling about taxes or tithes or traitors. It's all loud and angry. You try to blend in but realise too late that you're the only one not bowing or reacting. Someone notices. "You there!" a voice snaps. You freeze. Everyone turns. A guard in gleaming bronze steps down, points directly at you. "Who are you? What's your station?" You blink. Tourist? He frowns. That wasn't Latin, and it definitely wasn't a good answer. Or murmurs. Another guard joins him. They start advancing. You bolt. You duck through an alley, trip over a crate, recover, and keep going. A dog snarls from a doorway. Someone yells. A man with half a tunic and a full beard throws a pot at you. It shatters inches from your head. You run until your lungs burn, slipping into a dark corridor behind a temple, panting and heaving. Okay, reality check. You're alone. You don't speak the language. You don't understand the customs. And your modern education did not cover how to avoid being impaled by a Roman spear. Fun historical fact. The city of Rome during this period has over 1 million people, making it the largest metropolis in the ancient world. That's 1 million chances to mess up socially. Even citizens are expected to know their place, speak correctly, and show proper deference. You're a glitch in the matrix. They don't know what to do with you, and that makes you dangerous, or at least suspicious. Now for a weird fringe detail. Romans believed that strangers, especially those who arrived without proper introduction, could be harbingers of omens or curses. Some cults even kept watch for people like you. You haven't just landed in the past, you've landed in a city that might literally think you're the sign of an incoming plague or rebellion. And here's where scholars still argue, if someone from the modern world did show up in ancient Rome, how would they be received? Some historians believe you'd be enslaved on the spot, others argue you'd be killed as a threat to the social order. A few optimists say you might be taken in by a curious philosopher, but even they agree you'd need to speak Latin fast and probably fake a backstory involving being shipwrecked or concussed. But you've got none of that. You're barefoot, breathless, and nearly crying behind a temple wall, hoping no one heard you say tourist. A bell tolls somewhere far away. The sun is dropping lower, shadows stretch across the alley. You know you can't survive out here at night. And this was only your first hour. Let's get this out of the way early. Rome doesn't care about you, it doesn't care about your feelings, your backstory, or your shell-shocked expression as you stumble through its alleyways like a lost contestant from an historical reality show gone horribly wrong. You're in a world where even Roman citizens can barely get by, and you're basically a confused, squishy ghost. A ghost with zero Latin skills, no money, and a face that screams, "Please, rob me." You emerge from behind the temple as the sky turns a bruised shade of pink. Rome at sunset is almost beautiful, if you ignore the raw sewage smell, the buzz of flies, and the possibility of being stabbed for looking at someone the wrong way. You wander cautiously down a wide street paved with massive, uneven stones, the kind that catch your modern feet in all the wrong ways. The sun's warmth fades fast, and the breeze starts to bite. Great. You're underdressed, underfed, and honestly underqualified for surviving antiquity. And that's when it hits you. You need shelter. Badly. You start scanning for something, anything, an open doorway, a friendly face, even just a covered stoop. Instead, you find a crowd gathering around a man juggling torches near a statue of Mars. His performance is impressive, and for a second, you're distracted, until someone reaches into your pocket and yanks out your phone. "Hey!" you shout too late. The thief is already bolting, cackling. You chase instinctively, weaving through the crowd, but you're no match for a barefoot pickpocket with lifetime sprint training. He vanishes into a tangle of back streets, and you're left panting and defeated. Your one connection to the modern world, gone. The only thing more embarrassing than losing your phone in ancient Rome is the realization that it was never going to help you anyway. A young woman nearby eyes you cautiously. She's carrying a bundle of dried herbs and wearing a scarf over her head. You try to look non-threatening, which is hard when you're sweating twitchy and clearly not from around here. She speaks to you in a slow, deliberate Latin you can't decipher. You shrug. She says something else, this time louder, and gestures toward a narrow passage. You nod like you understand and follow. The passage leads to a courtyard with a crumbling well in the centre. People are sitting around on stones, muttering, cooking over small fires. It's not a hotel, it's barely a shelter. It's a makeshift inn for travellers and vagrants, the Roman equivalent of a sketchy hostel that smells like old soup and worse decisions. But it's dry, and for the first time all day, you're not running. You find a spot on a stone bench near the edge of the courtyard and try to settle in. Someone hands you a crust of bread. You take it, cautiously. It's rock hard and tastes like mildew and sawdust, but you eat it anyway. Hunger is hunger. You try not to think about sanitation, or the fact that everyone here is sharing food with visibly dirty hands. You're starting to understand why Roman life expectancy wasn't exactly impressive. Historical side note, the average Roman lifespan hovered around 35 years, if you were lucky. Disease, poor nutrition, and endless wars kept things pretty grim. And don't even get started on sanitation. Sure, they had aqueducts and public baths, but that doesn't mean anything when raw waste still gets dumped in the streets. But here's a weirder detail. Romans were obsessed with curses. Not just casual grumbling, but full-on curse tablets made of lead, engraved with the names of enemies and tossed into sacred springs. If someone wronged you, you didn't write a bad review. You called upon the gods of the underworld to ruin their life. You're kind of hoping no one's done that to you yet, but the night's still young. You try to sleep curled up with your back against the wall, using your arm as a pillow. The stone is cold. Bugs crawl nearby. Somewhere a baby cries. A dog barks endlessly in the distance. You don't sleep. You shiver and doze and wake in a panic more times than you can count. The stars overhead are dim behind city smoke. You wonder if you're dreaming. You wish you were dreaming. Then someone screams. You jolt upright. There's shouting in the courtyard. 2 men arguing in slurred Latin. One swings a jug. It shatters against the wall. The other lunges with a knife. Everyone else barely reacts. Apparently this is normal. You shrink into your corner, pretending to be invisible. It mostly works. The man with the knife is dragged away. The blood on the stones glistens in the firelight. You're not in Kansas anymore. You're not even in the ballpark. You're in a place where violence is ambient noise and sleep is a luxury. You think about trying to run, find a better place, a richer area, but you've seen how the wealthy live here. High walls, locked gates, private guards who'd stab first and ask questions never. There's an open debate among scholars about how easy it would be for a stranger to simply blend into Roman society. Some argue that the cosmopolitan nature of Rome would allow a clever, observant foreigner to fake it, especially if they had a good cover story. Others say nope, Romans were fiercely tribal and social identity was everything. Without proper clothes, a patron, and fluent Latin, you were toast. You try to get comfortable again, but your hip is numb from the stone. You sigh and stare at the flames in the centre of the courtyard, wondering how long you can survive like this. You're already dirty, hungry, and deeply aware that you smell like fear and desperation. You need a plan, something better than hope not to die tomorrow. But as you close your eyes and try again for sleep, one thing is crystal clear. Rome doesn't offer mercy to the lost. It offers spectacle, and you, unfortunately, are already part of it. Morning comes like a slap. No soft sunrise, no bird songs, just shouting. Somewhere nearby, someone's yelling about goats, loudly, and with feeling. You crack one sticky eyelid open to a grey Roman morning sky and realise your body aches in places you didn't know existed. Your back feels like it lost a bar fight with a brick wall. Your feet are blistered. Your mouth tastes like despair and ancient dust. You sit up slowly, bones groaning like you're 90. Around you, the courtyard's already alive with motion. Vendors pass by hawking bread and olives. A woman is trying to scrub a stain out of her tunic using water that looks like it crawled out of a gutter. The man who almost got stabbed last night is sitting across the fire pit, now laughing and missing a few teeth. Apparently grudges last about as long as the wine here. You decide to risk it. You're starving, filthy and confused, but at least you're not dead yet. You need food, and maybe, if the gods are feeling generous, someone who can understand even a word of English, or French, or emoji. You shuffle into the main street, trying not to look like a soft target. It doesn't work. You still look like a hungover statue of confusion wearing the Roman equivalent of a burlap sack and shame. Your stomach makes a dramatic protest as you pass a street vendor grilling fish over a smoky pit. The smell hits you like a freight train, salty, oily, and somehow sour. Next to the grill is a vat of what looks like brown paste and smells like, well, imagine the worst parts of a fish in a compost heap had a baby. That's garum, a fermented fish sauce that Romans love with a borderline religious fervour. You take one cautious sniff and instantly regret having a nose. Still, hunger wins. You mime eating, point at a chunk of bread with what might be fish baked into it, and slap down the only coin you grabbed from that sketchy sleeping guy's pouch in the courtyard. The vendor eyes you, sniffs the coin, shrugs, and hands you the food. Progress. You bite, mistake. The bread is stale. The fish is rubbery. The garum is everywhere. It hits your tongue with a rush of rot, salt, and what you can only describe as ancient rage. Your body tries to revolt. Your gag reflex flirts with rebellion. But you chew, you swallow, and you survive, barely. Fun fact, garum was the ketchup of the Roman world. It went on everything, from meat to fruit. They even mixed it into wine. That's right, fish wine. You silently thank your ancestors for inventing pizza and move on. As you meander through the market square, you try to listen, to pick up any word that sounds familiar. But the Latin flying around is fast, slurred, and heavy with regional dialects. It's like trying to understand Shakespeare read at double speed by a drunk opera singer. You make eye contact with a merchant and try your best Latin-adjacent hello. It comes out sounding like a sneeze and a question mark had a baby. She narrows her eyes. Barbarous, she spits. You shake your head, smiling awkwardly, trying not to panic. Barbarous, she says again, louder, now pointing. That's not a good word in this context. Roman society has a very clear opinion about barbarians, and none of it includes, let's give them a warm welcome and a smoothie. People start staring. You try to back away. The merchant isn't done. She keeps shouting, drawing a little crowd. A boy mimics your awkward accent. A drunk man throws a fruit pit that misses but does emotional damage. You start walking faster. The merchant hurls one final insult that, judging by the crowd's reaction, might have questioned your legitimacy, your fashion sense, and possibly your ancestry. You flee. You duck into a quieter alleyway and lean against a wall, breathing hard about. That could have gone worse, but not by much. You realise now that language isn't just a barrier, it's a threat. Every time you open your mouth, you risk offending someone, or worse, revealing that you don't belong here. In Rome, that's dangerous. There's an ongoing debate among classicists about how much linguistic tolerance the Romans had for strangers. While Latin dominated, the empire was home to hundreds of languages and dialects. Some say a foreigner with enough savvy could get by with gestures and charm. Others argue that fluency wasn't just helpful, it was survival, especially in Rome, where status and speech were linked like armour and rank. Your silence is starting to look like your best weapon. As you slump down onto a broken column and try to regroup, you notice a man sitting nearby, scribbling into a wax tablet with a stylus. He's older, hunched, with eyes that look like they've seen too much. He watches you for a long moment before speaking slowly. Gracchus. You blink. He tries again. Gracchus? Athenaeos. You catch the word Greek. You nod cautiously. He seems sceptical, but not hostile. He gestures to himself. Lucius. Then to you. Nomen? You panic for a second before blurting out the only thing that comes to mind. Tailor. He frowns. Laurus. You nod. Sure, that works. He writes it down like he's collecting rare bird names. Then he pulls out a small chunk of bread and breaks it in half, offering you some. You accept it with shaky hands. It's dry, but edible. Better than fish sauce trauma bread, anyway. For a moment, there's peace. You sit in silence, chewing, wondering if you've just made your first real connection. Lucius doesn't press you. Maybe he assumes you're just another wanderer. Maybe he doesn't care, but his calm, unbothered presence feels like a lifeline. You don't know how to ask, but you desperately want to stay near him. At least until the next disaster. Which, judging by your luck so far, is probably waiting around the next corner sharpening a very Roman knife. You're still chewing that dry, slightly mouldy bread when your stomach begins to feel uncertain. Not quite pain, not yet, but that ominous flutter. The kind that says, hey, remember that fish sweat loaf you ate earlier? Big mistake. You try to focus on your new, maybe friend Lucius, who seems content to sit and scratch at his wax tablet while humming something tuneless under his breath. He hasn't shooed you off or called you a barbarian, so he's officially your best friend in Rome now. Probably your only one. But your gut has other plans. The discomfort quickly evolves into the kind of stomach pain that makes you question every decision you've ever made. You clutch your side, trying not to make a scene, but Lucius notices. He raises an eyebrow. You shake your head and smile, the international symbol for everything's fine even though I'm dying inside. He mutters something, then stands and gestures for you to follow. You hobble after him down a narrow side street lined with cracked statues and laundry hung so low it slaps you in the face. Lucius leads you to a low-arched building with steam rolling from the entrance. Carved into the doorway are two Latin words you barely register. Balneae publicae, public baths. Your brain is screaming, this is not a hospital, but your insides are screaming louder. You duck inside and you're instantly hit with thick, wet air and the smell of oil, sweat and too many bodies in not enough space. Lucius hands you off to a man with a clay pot full of something that looks like mud and smells like pepper and mint. Had a confusing baby. He gestures for you to sit. Apparently Roman medicine starts with getting naked. Before you can protest, your tunic is whisked off and someone smears the paste across your stomach. You consider resisting, but you're too far gone now. Besides, this stuff actually feels not awful. A little tingly, a little cold, but not as humiliating as the fact that 10 people are watching you with mild interest while discussing the price of chickpeas. Historical fact incoming. Roman medical theory was largely based on balancing the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you had an upset stomach, chances are a physician would attribute it to an excess of one of those charming fluids and prescribe a variety of bizarre remedies, from herbal pastes to bloodletting to, yes, leeches. You're hoping today's menu doesn't include anything bitey. The man tending to you pats your shoulder, says something soothing sounding, and walks away. Lucius reappears with a cup. You peer into it and see a cloudy greenish liquid. You shake your head vigorously. He shrugs and drinks it himself, then belches contentedly. You spend the next hour lying on a heated stone bench, feeling your stomach fight the war of garum and regret. Every so often someone walks by and tosses a glance your way, but no one bothers you. It's oddly peaceful. If you ignore the yelling, coughing, and the very real chance someone's going to slip and crack their skull in the next room over. Eventually Lucius taps your foot and gestures for you to get up. You wobble to your feet, a bit better, still queasy, but not dying. Progress. He leads you to a colder room where a slave pours water over your head from a bucket. It's not refreshing. It's like being attacked by an icy ghost. But at least you're clean now, or cleaner. Here's a fringe fact for your collection. Roman bathhouses were also social centres, almost like gyms, bars and Facebook all rolled into one damp building. Deals were made, secrets were traded, spies listened in while scrubbing their elbows, and diseases spread like wildfire, but nobody seemed to mind as long as the water was warm. As you dry off with what might be a communal rag, Lucius hands you your tunic, which has been rinsed and returned by a boy with a bowl cut and zero sense of personal space. You get dressed, still dizzy, still hungry, but upright. Lucius pats you on the shoulder. You hope this is his way of saying, "You didn't die, congrats." You step back into the street. The sun's higher now, the city's louder. The ache in your belly is dulled to a grumble. You're alive, gross, but alive. You decide to stick with Lucius for a while. Maybe he's a scholar. Maybe a retired soldier. He seems to know his way around the chaos. You follow him to a food stall where he buys something that looks like flatbread with crushed olives and goat cheese. He offers you a piece. You hesitate but accept. It's actually decent. Salty, chewy, and blessedly fish sauce free. You try to thank him. He just shrugs, then gestures to the crowds and says something like, "Herbs. The city." He draws a rough map in the dust with a stick. Forum, temple, amphitheatre. "Domus," he says, pointing to a small square. You assume that's his house. He points to you and lifts an eyebrow. You just shrug and say nullus domus, which is probably mangled Latin, but he gets it. No house, no home. His expression softens for a second, and then he barks out a laugh, slaps you on the back and keeps walking. You follow because, honestly, what else can you do? Wandering alone got you almost stabbed, almost cursed, and medically spoiled with mint mud. Lucius is the best plan you've got. Here's something scholars still bicker about. Would a modern person, even a clever one, be able to really pass in ancient Rome? With enough luck, maybe. But luck runs out fast, especially if you say the wrong thing, wear the wrong thing, or eat the wrong thing. You've already done all three, but for now, you're breathing. Your insides are settling. And you've got a Roman stranger who hasn't yet sold you into slavery, or thrown you into a pit. Which, all things considered, is a massive win. It's around midday now, and the heat has climbed from mildly uncomfortable to "someone please peel me off this sun-baked wall like a stale pastry." You're trailing Lucius through winding streets, your tunic clinging to you in unfortunate places as the city thrums with midday activity. Rome is at its loudest and most chaotic right now. Merchants shouting, livestock bleating, children screaming, and somewhere in the distance someone yelling about stolen sandals. Lucius leads you through a maze of alleyways up a narrow slope, and suddenly you emerge into a shaded courtyard filled with coloured mosaics and creeping vines. It's quieter here, though still tinged with the ambient groans of city life. He gestures for you to sit on a bench beneath a fig tree. You're beginning to feel a little more human again, though the rumble in your stomach suggests you've got about 3 hours before your body turns on you for good. Lucius disappears inside a modest house, more of a glorified stone box with a tiled roof, and you're left to marvel at the surroundings. The courtyard has a little fountain in the centre, burbling away, and a stone slab engraved with some kind of poem. You squint at the Latin. Nope, still no idea. When Lucius returns, he has another man with him. This one's younger, probably in his early 20s, and dressed in cleaner robes. He looks at you with the kind of polite disgust that says, "Why is this sweaty disaster on my property?" You smile weakly and wave. It doesn't help. Lucius mutters something to him, possibly your name, or at least the mangled Taylorus version, and the young man raises an eyebrow. They have a brief exchange, too fast for you to follow. Then the young man, let's call him Snobius, turns to you and speaks slowly, carefully, with exaggerated vowels. You catch about 3 words. Name, where, and something that might be clothes or clowns. You try to respond with basic miming. Me, you say, pointing to your chest. From far, very far, you point to the sky. Other place. You sound like a toddler who hit their head too many times. Snobius doesn't look convinced. Lucius, however, just chuckles and waves you both inside. The interior is cool and smells faintly of oil and roasted grain. There's a low table, some clay cups, and a bowl of olives that look like they've been sitting out since the reign of Romulus. You're not sure if this is lunch or a test. Lucius pours a cup of water and hands it to you. You hesitate, 21st century instincts screaming bacteria, but drink anyway. You're already committed to this timeline's diseases, might as well hydrate. Here's a historical detail that might surprise you. While many Roman homes had access to aqueduct-fed water, contamination was still a problem. Lead pipes were everywhere, and though the debate over whether they caused widespread poisoning is ongoing, we can agree on this. Modern plumbing is a miracle you will never again take for granted. After a few more awkward exchanges and a lot of gesturing, Snobius seems to ease up a little. He points to himself and says, "Quintus." Finally, a name. You nod. "Tailorus," you offer again. He nods, frowning, like it's still not sitting right with him. Then Quintus does something unexpected. He pulls out a wooden writing tablet, scribbles a few Latin words and shows it to you. You stare blankly. He sighs, scribbles again, this time drawing a crude stick figure with arms raised and the sun above it. You point at the sun. "Sol?" You try. He nods. You point at the stick figure. "Homo?" He grins, little. "Imber," he says, tapping the top of the figure. "Rain." "Ah, weather. You're playing charades with a nobleman now. Fantastic. Despite yourself, you kind of enjoy it. It's the first actual connection you've made outside of Lucius. And even if it's awkward and slow, it beats being chased with a broom or mistaken for a demon. Eventually Lucius leaves the two of you alone. Quintus stands, gestures for you to follow, and leads you through a series of corridors into what looks like a personal study. The walls are lined with scrolls, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and old parchment. He hands you one, watching your reaction. You unroll it carefully. Latin text, hand-scribed, probably poetry or philosophy. The letters blur together, and you shake your head. "Too hard," you mutter. He nods, seeming almost pleased with your honesty. Then he pulls out something completely unexpected. A map. Not just any map, a really old one. You recognise the Mediterranean Sea, some oddly shaped land masses, and a lot of stylized ships and beasts. He points to Rome, then to the east, tapping places like Alexandria and Athens. You nod, unsure what he's getting at. Then he points to you and shrugs. "Under?" You pause. What do you say? "America doesn't exist yet. England, still tribal." You point vaguely west. "Beyond the ocean," you say. "Far." Quintus blinks, then chuckles like you just said you were from Atlantis. He scribbles something in his notebook, maybe delusional in Latin. You spend the rest of the afternoon trying to mime your way through basic questions. He asks about your clothes. You show him the stitching. He asks about your teeth. You smile, and he mutters something in awe. Dental hygiene must be mind-blowing to him. Eventually you ask to rest, and he shows you to a small storage room with straw mats. It's not luxurious, but it beats stone benches and mystery lice. Here's a weird fringe fact to file away. Romans were incredibly superstitious about teeth. They believed losing them young was a sign of bad fortune, and amulets were sometimes worn just to prevent it. Your cleanish, mostly straight modern teeth, straight up sorcery. That night, lying on the mat, you start to think maybe, just maybe, you found a rhythm. A tiny space where you're not being accused of heresy or offered fermented fish sludge. Quintus is curious, not hostile. Lucius, quiet but kind. Maybe there's hope here. But let's not forget, Rome is a city of masks. And right now, yours is made of threadbare lies, bad Latin, and dumb luck. If it slips, you're one poorly timed sneeze away from the executioner's block. You wake up in a dark room to the sound of something dripping, slow, rhythmic, and unsettling. For a moment, you forget where you are. Then your nose reminds you, straw mat, damp walls, and a lingering aroma of olive oil, dust, and other people's feet. Ah yes, Rome, still here. You sit up, bones stiff, and stretch under the low wooden ceiling. Light spills through a tiny slit of a window, casting shadows that make you look like a haunted scarecrow. You've slept in worse places, but only in nightmares. Footsteps approach outside. A slave, young, scrawny and clearly regretting his life, pokes his head into the storage room, gestures at you with a grunt and tosses you a fresh tunic. Or at least fresh by ancient standards. It smells only mildly of mould. You pull it on, follow him out into the main house, where Lucius and Quintus are seated, sipping watered wine and tearing apart a loaf of dark bread. They wave you over. You nod, trying to act like this is totally normal, and you weren't just using a straw mat as a mattress in a world with no toothpaste. Quintus gives you a quick glance and tosses you an olive. It's hard and bitter. You choke it down because, as always, hunger is the boss of you now. After the brief breakfast, Quintus claps his hands and gestures for you to follow. He's beaming, like a man who has a fun errand planned. You're hoping this involves food or learning more Latin, but you start to get suspicious when he hands you a folded strip of linen, a pair of sandals that look barely legal, and a bar of soap the size of a brick. You're going out, again. You follow him through the market, past temples and shouting vendors, until you arrive at a towering arched structure covered in marble and noise. People are streaming in and out, chatting, yelling, laughing. The air smells like charcoal, perfume, sweat, and something roasted. You catch a whiff of urine too. Lovely. And that's when you realise where you are. The Thermae, a Roman public bathhouse. Again. This one is enormous. Dozens of rooms, layers of steam, coloured murals on every wall. You were at a bathhouse before, but that was more back-alley medicinal chaos. This is the elite stuff. Quintus clearly wants to show you the full Roman cleansing experience, and based on the grin plastered across his face, it's going to be very, very awkward for you. You enter a dressing room and suddenly you're surrounded by dozens of half-naked men lounging on benches or oiling each other's backs. You try not to panic. Nudity is not just casual here, it's expected. You look at your linen wrap and the implied expectation. Quintus is already half disrobed and chatting with a man who appears to be entirely made of muscle and hubris. You swallow your pride, clothes off, linen on, feet into sandals. You try to hide the panic on your face as you shuffle through the arches into the tepidarium, the warm room. It's like walking into a steamed salad. Marble benches line the walls and people are reclining, pouring water over themselves, chatting like it's the town square. Quintus grabs a jar of olive oil, dips his hand in and starts coating his arms and chest with practiced efficiency. Then he points at you and gestures to your skin. You blink. He wants to oil you. This is happening. A bearded man nearby laughs and says something you don't catch, but you're pretty sure it's Latin for, "This guy has never exfoliated in his life." Quintus takes matters into his own hands, literally, and smears a generous glob of oil on your shoulders. It's a moment. You smile awkwardly, not knowing whether to say thank you or apologise. After the oiling comes the strigil, a curved metal tool for scraping dirt, sweat and dignity off your skin. Quintus demonstrates on his arm, and then hands you one. You scrape cautiously, surprised at the amount of grime that comes off. You're a human crayon being peeled. It's gross, but weirdly satisfying. From there you move into the caldarium, the hot room, and by hot, we mean your pores scream open, and your vision blurs within seconds. It's like being slow-boiled in your own sweat. You sit dizzy, between two sweating senators discussing someone's failed grain shipment and a teenager picking his teeth with a bone. Historical fact for you, these bathhouses weren't just for hygiene. They were the epicentre of Roman social life. Deals were made, gossip traded, and egos massaged with a mix of steam and flattery. It wasn't weird to spend hours here, lounging naked with strangers while someone read poetry or offered to scrub your back. You're trying your best to be invisible. Unfortunately, you're still weird. Your hair is too short, your accent is not Latin, and you flinch every time someone walks past holding tongs or a ladle. One man stares at you for a long moment, then mutters, "Gallus?" You're not sure if he means a Gaul or a chicken. Either way, you nod and move on. Eventually the whole procession shifts into the frigidarium, the cold plunge. Quintus grins at you and gestures grandly. You shake your head. No. Nope. No thank you. But peer pressure is eternal. A group of men cheer as Quintus cannonballs into the water. Then everyone looks at you. You sigh, close your eyes, and jump. It's freezing. Your soul exits your body. Your thoughts crystallize into a single sentence. I hate everything about this. You surface gasping, spluttering, and possibly inventing Latin profanity on the spot. The crowd roars with laughter. Quintus claps you on the back, his version of affection. You're still not sure whether this is a hazing ritual or a friendship test, but either way you passed. Kind of. Here's your quirky fact of the day. Some Roman bathhouses employed professional armpit sniffers. That's right. People were hired to check for body odour levels and recommend additional scrubbing, which really makes you appreciate your stick of deodorant back home. As you dry off, again with a communal rag that probably has the personal history of a small nation, you feel oddly accomplished. You survived the bathhouse. You scrubbed off a few layers of fear. You didn't die of embarrassment or heat stroke. Progress. Quintus leads you out into the open air, now freshly scented with rose oil and misplaced pride. You both dress in silence. He glances at you with a little nod of approval, like, not bad for a fish-out-of-water barbarian. And then he says something calmly, like it's no big deal, but you catch a word, just one. Cena. Dinner. Your stomach growls in response. Great. Now you get to embarrass yourself all over again at a Roman feast. You're clean, possibly over-oiled, and now heading to dinner with two Roman men who think you're either a charming foreigner or some kind of well-meaning idiot. Either way, they've taken you in for now, and your main goal is to not mess it up by, say, eating the centerpiece or calling Jupiter the big guy upstairs. Quintus leads the way, chatting with Lucius while you trail behind, trying not to trip on your borrowed sandals, which are less footwear and more leather regrets. The streets of Rome at dusk glow amber, washed in that perfect golden hour light that would make a modern influencer weep. Smoke drifts from kitchen grates, and the air buzzes with smells. Roasting meat, boiling lentils, fresh bread, and the occasional alarming whiff of whatever passes for garbage disposal in a city without trash collection. You keep your head down, partly to avoid attention, but also to dodge the buckets of waste being flung from windows. Romans really love gravity-based sanitation. You reach the Domus, Quintus's family home, and this place is a step above everything you've seen so far. Columns, painted frescoes, a tiled entryway with a warning written in mosaics that you're 85% sure says "Don't be annoying." You pass through the atrium, where a slave pours rosewater over your hands and hands you a clean towel. You wipe nervously, trying not to look like someone who once considered ketchup a vegetable. And then you enter the triclinium, the dining room. Forget everything you know about tables and chairs. This room is built for lounging. 3 couches arranged around a low table, with pillows so squishy you immediately sink 2 inches into one and feel like a melting marshmallow. Quintus and Lucius take their places, reclining on their sides like it's just another Tuesday, which, for them, it is. You awkwardly copy them, nearly roll off the couch, and manage to knock over a cup of wine. Great start. The first course arrives. Olives, cheese, little pastries stuffed with mystery meat. You pick at it politely, trying not to inhale everything like a desperate raccoon. Quintus talks while he eats, occasionally gesturing to you with bits of food. You don't understand half of it, but he seems amused whenever you nod and smile like a diplomat who skipped their briefing. Then comes the garum. Again. A servant pours it over a platter of roasted vegetables and eggs, and the smell hits you like a memory you've been trying to suppress. Lucius sees your face and chuckles, offering you a plain piece of bread instead. You mouth a silent thank you, and take it with all the grace of a man about to cry into carbs. Fun fact, Roman dinners weren't just about eating, they were events. A chance to network, show off wealth, recite poetry, and generally pretend you weren't surrounded by disease and political backstabbing. Tonight's gathering is casual, just the 3 of you, but you can feel the performance under it all. Every gesture, every bite, every little smirk, it's a dance, and you're learning the steps one awkward stumble at a time. You try one of the egg and vegetable things soaked in garum and nearly choke. Not from the taste, though that's challenging, but because a fishbone lodges in your throat. You cough so hard you almost flip off the couch. Quintus pats your back. Lucius pours you more wine. You recover, red-faced, watery-eyed, and deeply aware that your ancestors survived plagues and conquests just to produce someone who almost died from brunch. Then comes the main course. Duck, maybe? You think it's duck, or a very confident pigeon. It's been stuffed with dates and almonds and seasoned with what smells like cinnamon and black pepper. You're suspicious, but one bite in and you're impressed. It's rich and sweet and spree all at once. A win, finally. You nod in appreciation, and Quintus seems pleased. He starts asking you questions again, this time slower, more deliberate. Patria, he says, pointing to you. You recognise that one. Homeland. You point west. Multos dies, you say, hoping that's something close to many days away. He squints, not fully getting it, but nods anyway. Lucius tosses in something that sounds philosophical, probably about fate or goats. You try to ask something back. You say, to scribis, while miming writing. Quintus brightens. Scriba, he declares, nodding. A scribe. Of course, the wax tablets, the ink stains, the slightly smug vibe. It all fits. He taps his head, then his stylus. Verba sunt armor, he says. Words are weapons. You nod like that makes total sense, even though it only half does. Here's a historical truth. Literacy in Rome was rare, but highly valued. Scribes held a unique role. They weren't just writers. They were record keepers, poets, bureaucrats, sometimes even spies. And for a brief moment, you wonder if you could fake that. You can write, sort of, if someone lets you use a pen that doesn't involve dipping into squid ink and praying to Mercury. Then, as if summoned by your thoughts, a slave brings out a scroll and lays it beside Quintus. He unrolls it and starts reading aloud. It's poetry, rhythmic, lyrical, probably in praise of some long-dead general or the moon or both. Lucius claps softly. You just smile, trying not to fall asleep face first into a fig tart. But just when you think you've survived the night, it happens. Quintus gestures to you, hands you a stylus and a small wax tablet. He wants you to write something. Panic. Your hands sweat. You stall by drinking more wine, which was a mistake. You hesitate, then lean over the tablet. You etch a few lines, trying to remember any Latin. You end up writing a sentence that probably says the sky speaks with foot apples. Quintus reads it, blinks, smiles politely. Lucius raises one eyebrow and then bursts out laughing. At least someone's enjoying this. But then Quintus nods encouragingly and says, Discipulus. A student. You. He's not expecting brilliance, he just thinks you're learning. And in that moment you realise this weird Roman noble has decided to teach you. He thinks you're someone worth educating. A clueless barbarian, sure, but not worthless. Here's a scholarly debate you might find comforting. Some historians believe Roman elites were fascinated by foreigners, especially odd ones. They might treat you as a curiosity, a project, even a friend. Others insist they'd see you as a threat. But in Quintus's eyes, for now, you're a puzzle, one worth solving. As the evening winds down, you lie back on the couch, staring at the flickering oil lamp overhead. Your stomach is full, your body is clean, and nobody has tried to crucify you today. A high bar, but here we are. And with that thought, you let yourself close your eyes, trying not to think about the fact that eventually you'll have to leave this house and face the rest of Rome again. Morning hits you with the grace of a goat to the face. You wake up on the same straw mat in Quintus's storage room, mouth dry, back sore, and brain foggy from too much ancient wine, and the emotional whiplash of pretending to be a student instead of a time-travelling lunatic. You stretch, groaning, and hear the unmistakable crunch of straw tangled in your hair. There's also a mild smell of vinegar, and something vaguely metallic, probably the scent of someone boiling bronze nearby, or your own slow descent into smelling like old coins. You shuffle out into the atrium where a few household slaves are already at work, sweeping, pouring water, muttering about laundry and gods. None of them make eye contact. They are trained for invisibility, but you unfortunately are not. Quintus is nowhere to be seen, but Lucius is perched on a bench, eyes closed, muttering to himself. Praying, meditating, or, given how he's swaying slightly, still recovering from last night's garum-laced feast. He opens one eye when he hears you approach, squints like he's trying to identify whether you're a person or a hallucination, and then nods. Salve, he croaks. You respond with your usual go-to, nod, smile, vague hand gesture. You're practically fluent in body language at this point. After some food, more bread, olives, and what might be goat yogurt, you're ushered outside. Apparently, you're on your own today. Quintus is off doing something noble and scribey, and Lucius disappears into a crowd of shouting men arguing about grain prices. So here you are, alone, again, back in the belly of the beast, The Roman streets hit you differently this time. Now that your body isn't screaming from malnutrition and you're not actively being chased, you can finally look around and absorb it. There's a kind of beauty to the madness. Painted shop signs swinging in the breeze, musicians on corners plucking out shaky tunes, dogs weaving between carts. You spot a fruit vendor piling apples into a basket, their red skins glossy in the sunlight, and for a moment it all feels almost manageable. But then the stares start. It begins with a child, just a quick glance and a whisper to her mother. Then a man slows his walk to get a better look at you. Then 2 more people do the same. You realise too late. Your posture, your walk, your hesitation at every turn, they mark you. You don't belong. Even after the bathhouse, the tunic, the lesson in not dying during dinner, you still move like a foreigner, an outsider, a very obvious question mark in a world that hates confusion. Someone mutters the word again, barbarous. You try to ignore it, moving faster through the crowd. But it keeps happening. Eyes darting toward you. Whispers, people taking a step back as you pass. One old woman makes the sign of the horns with her fingers, warding off evil. You're not just weird, you're unnerving. And in Rome, unnerving has a tendency to get people executed. Historical fact for you, Romans were extremely suspicious of anything unfamiliar. Foreigners, especially those with strange speech or behaviour, were often accused of being witches, spies or omens. Add in any random modern object you still have, say a shoelace or the weird elastic waistband of your undergarments, and you're basically walking superstition bait. You duck down a side alley to get away from the eyes. Bad idea. Within seconds, 2 men follow you. They're rough-looking, tunics dirty, sandals broken, one of them holding a staff that's more clubbed than walking aid. They start talking, fast and low. You try to look casual, like someone who definitely knows where they are and is not, in fact, a human, lost and found item from another century. One of them steps in front of you. The other blocks the exit. Or they ask something. You don't answer. They try again, louder, more insistent. You shrug, palms up, and say, "Non intelligo." I don't understand. They don't like that. One grabs your tunic. You panic, push, duck, run. Your feet slap the cobblestones, lungs burning, heart in your throat. You dart through stalls, past startled vendors and a man yelling about chickens. You barely register your surroundings as you race through the chaos, until you crash into something soft, loud and angry. You've run headlong into a cart filled with amphorae of garum. The clay jars wobble. You freeze trying to grab them. Too late. One tips, then another. A cascade of fish sauce crashes to the ground in an explosion of rot, oil, and pure olfactory hell. You're drenched, soaked in the tears of ancient anchovies. Everyone within 30 feet recoils in horror. The vendor screams at you in Latin so fast and furious it breaks the sound barrier. People gather. Someone laughs. Someone else gags. You try to apologize. More fish goo drips down your legs. The 2 guys who were chasing you earlier take one look at your new stink and back off. Disgusted. Congratulations. You've invented fish-based pepper spray. You stagger away, trying to find water, dignity, or an open manhole to crawl into. You pass a fountain and dunk your head in, splashing desperately. Someone yells at you, probably because this fountain is for drinking, not bath time. Whatever. Your eyeballs were at risk. Priorities. Weird fringe fact? Garum was so prized it was once used as payment for taxes in some regions of the empire. There were entire factories devoted to fermenting vats of fish guts for months at a time. The workers, often slaves, and they reeked. You now smell like them. Congrats! You've joined the ranks of the ancient world's most aromatic labour force. You find a quiet wall and slump against it, dripping and miserable. The crowd has mostly dispersed, though you're pretty sure the smell is still wafting downwind like a curse. You try to breathe through your mouth and think. There's an open question among historians about how Roman crowds would treat someone like you long term. Some suggest curiosity might turn into acceptance. Others argue it would curdle into fear, and fear into violence. Right now you're a spectacle. A foreigner with weird speech, bad luck, and terrible choices in lunch stops. You know you need to change this fast. You can't keep wandering the city solo, getting mistaken for a demon, a criminal, or both. You need a cover story, a reason to exist. Something better than random, sweaty mystery man who crashes dinner parties and ruins condiments. You scrape what dignity you have left off the cobblestones, wring out your tunic and start walking. Back to Quintus. Back to whatever plan he's got. Because if you don't figure out who you're supposed to be here, someone else will decide for you. And Rome? Rome doesn't do second chances. You stink of fermented regret and possibly fish-based divine punishment as you limp back toward Quintus's domus. The stench of garum has soaked into your skin, your sandals, and probably your soul. People on the street veer away from you like you're a walking plague warning. One man actually mutters a prayer and drops a tiny clay figurine at your feet. You don't know whether to be offended or honoured. Either way, you leave it there and keep walking head low, dignity somewhere several miles behind you. When you finally arrive at the house, the doorman, the same stone-faced older man who has ignored you every other time, actually wrinkles his nose. He doesn't speak, just steps aside with a look that says, "Don't drip on the floor, freak." Fair. Inside, the air is cool and perfumed, a cruel contrast to your own personal horror show. You shuffle through the atrium, already hearing footsteps approaching. Quintus appears, holding a wax tablet in one hand, looking every bit the clean, well-bred Roman scholar. His eyes widen as he sees you. "Quid est hoc?" he asks, voice caught between curiosity and horror. You shrug. "Garum, you say. He flinches, like you just said demon blood. You point at yourself. "Garum accidentum." That's not real Latin, but it gets the point across. You mime a jar tipping and falling. He groans and rubs his forehead. Lucius enters next, takes one whiff, and just turns around without a word. You stand there, dripping on mosaic tile, fully aware that this is the low point of your new Roman life. Or at least you hope it's the low point. If things get worse than this, you're going to need a time machine and about 4 therapists. A servant appears and wordlessly gestures for you to follow. You do, limping behind like a soggy ghost. You're taken through a narrow corridor to a back room you haven't seen before. A utilitarian space with buckets, rags, and what looks like a cauldron over a brazier. A slave is already stirring something that smells like soap and smoke. She gestures to a stool. You sit, and she pours lukewarm water over you while muttering in what might be a mix of Latin and general disdain. You sit still while she scrubs. And scrubs. She practically scours you like a dirty floor, scraping under your nails, scrubbing behind your ears, muttering "garum" over and over like it's both a curse and a diagnosis. When she's done, you're raw, red, and smell faintly of ash and lavender. Better, but still emotionally tenderized. While you dry off with a rough linen cloth, Quintus pokes his head in, now looking more curious than grossed out. He raises an eyebrow. Again, you nod. Again, you mime someone chasing you. Hominus! Rapiant? That might mean men grabbed me or men turned into rapids. Either way, he gets the gist. You point to yourself. Alienus. Stranger. He sighs, then enters fully, folding his arms. You think he's going to scold you, maybe send you packing. Instead, he walks over, places a hand on your shoulder, and says something deliberate and slow. Multi hic timent quod nesciunt. You catch the words, many here fear what they don't understand. That hits hard because he's right. You don't belong, you look wrong, speak wrong, act wrong, and this place, it doesn't have patience for wrong. Quintus walks you back toward the study. He pulls out a scroll and begins to unroll it. Discere de bez, he says firmly. You recognise the command you must learn. Then he hands you a wax tablet, a stylus, and points at a line of text. It's time for Latin class, ancient Rome style. And based on his expression, this is your last chance before he starts considering other uses for your still mysterious presence. For the next hour, you stumble through basic vocabulary. He points at things, table, wall, fire, wine, and you repeat the words. Sometimes you guess right, sometimes he corrects you. Every now and then, Lucius walks by and throws in a sarcastic comment. You don't understand most of it, but the tone translates. You're basically a linguistic toddler, and the grown-ups are just hoping you don't poop on the floor. Still, you're learning. You start to get the rhythm of Latin, the case endings, the word order that makes no sense until it suddenly does. You remember bits from long-forgotten school lessons. A phrase clicks, then another, and then Quintus gives you a nod. A small one, but it feels like winning the Olympics. Here's your historical moment for today. Formal education in Rome was brutal. Young boys, Girls didn't get much in the way of schooling, would recite texts until their throats bled, often with a tutor standing nearby holding a stick. Grammar, rhetoric, philosophy. Memorize, recite, repeat. Your lucky Quintus seems to have the patience of a mildly amused demigod. Then, to your surprise, he switches topics. Hodi, templum Iovis. You catch the word templum, temple, and Iovis, Jupiter. He wants to take you to the temple. You smile, nod, pretending this sounds like a calm educational outing, but your stomach tightens. Because here's the thing about Roman religion. It's not all hymns and warm fuzzies. Worship here is business. Contracts with gods, blood offerings, public displays of piety. And you're about to walk into a sacred space with the religious understanding of a confused garden gnome. Quintus clearly thinks it'll be good for you. He talks as you walk, explaining things slowly, gesturing toward altars, using hand motions to explain concepts like sacrifice and divine favour. You try to follow, nodding along while also watching your step. These temple steps are high, slick with wear, and absolutely designed to take out the clumsy. Inside the temple, the air changes. Cooler, still, heavy with incense. The statue of Jupiter looms ahead. Massive, golden, eyes that seem to watch you back. Priests in white togas shuffle around, murmuring prayers. A goat bleats somewhere in the background, and you sincerely hope it's not part of the demonstration. Quintus kneels, mutters a prayer, then gestures for you to do the same. You follow his lead, copying the bowing, the hand motions, the murmuring. You try to fake a whispered prayer. Jupiter, Maximus, thanks for not killing me. You wince, probably not canon. Then Quintus takes out a small offering, bread and wine, and places it at the altar. You try to mirror him, placing a coin Lucius gave you earlier. He nods, satisfied. A priest passes by and gives you a double take, frowns, but says nothing. Close call. Quintus whispers, Melius, better. But here's your fringe fact. Jupiter was often seen not as a merciful father figure, but a vengeful, contract-enforcing cosmic landlord. True up and lightning wasn't metaphorical, it was destiny. You suspect your awkward presence here has probably triggered a few minor curses. As you exit the temple, Quintus claps you on the shoulder. Romum discis, he says. You're learning Rome. You exhale. Maybe you're not entirely doomed after all. Then someone shouts. You turn, a crowd's forming at the bottom of the temple stairs, and in the centre, a man holding your old phone, and yelling Magus, wizard. Oh no. The crowd gathers fast, like blood to a wound. You barely have time to process what you're seeing, before the shouting turns to pointing, and the pointing turns to pushing. The man holding your phone, a scrawny sunburnt vendor with a tunic that's seen better centuries, waves it like a cursed artifact above his head. It glints in the sunlight, a black, smooth, impossibly modern rectangle in a world of clay and bronze. Your stomach drops. He's yelling the same word over and over. Magus, a magician, a sorcerer, possibly worse, and the people around him, they're eating it up. Every new Roman within earshot turns their head and squints. You see expressions shift, from idle curiosity to suspicion, then to fear. The vendor presses the side of your phone, and the screen briefly lights up. That seals it. The crowd gasps like they just watched a man turn wine into snakes. A woman shrieks, a child starts crying. Somewhere someone yells Diabolus. Great. You're now officially an agent of dark forces. 10 out of 10 wouldn't recommend. Quintus stiffens beside you, eyes locked on the phone. He doesn't move for a moment, and then he turns to you, voice low and sharp. Tuus est? You hesitate, lie, deny, pretend you've never seen a phone in your life and it just happens to perfectly match your pants? No. You nod slowly. Meus est, you say. Mine. He curses under his breath, grabs your arm, and pulls you back from the crowd just as a rock flies past your head and shatters against a column. Okay, so this escalated quickly, very Roman of them. Curamus, Quintus says. Let's run, you don't argue. You bolt down the temple steps, Lucius somewhere behind you, shouting at someone to make way. People part, sort of, but there's chaos now. The shouting man is still waving your phone, but others are chasing you, young men angry and energized by the whiff of danger. To them, you're not a confused traveller. You're a walking offence to the gods, and Rome does not tolerate offence lightly. Historical sidebar. accusations of sorcery in ancient Rome were taken extremely seriously. You didn't need to actually conjure fire or fly, just owning unfamiliar tools, performing strange rituals, or even having foreign religious symbols could get you arrested, tortured, or executed. And guess what a glowing rectangle with touch controls looks like to someone whose most advanced gadget is a wax tablet? You and Quintus dart through narrow alleys, your sandals slapping the stone, lungs burning. You leap over a puddle that might be water but probably isn't. Someone tries to grab your tunic, you twist away. Someone else throws something, it hits the wall beside your head and explodes into a puff of herbs or possibly mould. You're not even sure where you're going until you see the back gate of Quintus's domus up ahead. The doorman sees you, and to his credit, doesn't even hesitate. He throws the door open just long enough for you both to slip inside before slamming it shut behind you with a resounding thud. You collapse in the atrium, chest heaving. Quintus is standing, pasting, running a hand through his hair like he's trying not to scream. A moment later, Lucius stumbles in, clutching a stitch in his side. He mutters something about chaos, peasants, and needing a stronger drink. Then comes the interrogation. Quintus points at you. Quid est? What is it? You hesitate. You don't know how to explain an iPhone in Latin. There is no Latin for Bluetooth. There is no translation for battery life or facial recognition. So you do your best. You mime. You say lumen, light. You say nuntie, messages. You try machina ser machine. You even draw a little rectangle in the dust and sketch a stick figure holding it. It all sounds insane. Quintus listens with furrowed brows, arms crossed. Lucius just stares at the drawing like it might bite him. You can tell they don't believe you. Not completely, but they also don't know what to do with you. Not yet. You're no longer just a foreigner, you're something else. Something dangerous. Then Lucius mutters something. Quintus nods. You catch the word magistratus. Uh-oh. They want to go to the authorities. You shake your head. Priculum est, you say. It's dangerous. You mind being arrested. Chains, execution. Lucius snorts. That one he understands. But Quintus looks conflicted. He's a man of law, of order. Turning you in might feel like the right thing to do, but something in your face, or maybe in the memory of you nearly dying from fish sauce, holds him back. Instead, he nods slowly. A helandum est, he says. It must be hidden. You don't know whether to be relieved or more afraid. He leads you to a storage room and shows you a loose tile in the floor. Together, you lift it and bury the phone in the dark, dry space beneath. He replaces the tile, pats the stone flat. You stand there, staring at the spot where your last connection to home just disappeared into the dirt. Fringe fact of the day, Romans believed in numina, spirits that inhabited objects and places. Everything had a kind of soul. If someone starts to believe your phone is alive, it won't just be weird, it'll be sacred, or cursed, or both. You've just planted a modern ghost in the foundations of ancient Rome. Quintus rests a hand on your shoulder again, his expression serious. Nemo siat, he says. Let no one know. You nod, you won't tell, mostly because there's no one left to tell. But even with the phone hidden, the damage is done. People saw, whispers will spread. And once Rome starts whispering, it doesn't stop, not until someone's bleeding. Later that night, as you lie awake on your straw mat, you hear shouting in the distance. Not angry, just voices carrying on the wind. Someone's singing, someone else is crying, and you stare at the ceiling, wondering how many more days you can keep this lie alive. Here's a scholarly debate worth considering. Could a modern object truly change Roman history if it landed in the wrong or right hands? Some argue that even the simplest tool, a compass, a battery, a pair of glasses, could cause massive ripple effects. Others say the ancient world was too rigid, too skeptical, too slow to adopt what it couldn't explain. You wonder what category you fall into. All you know is that tomorrow you'll wake up in a city where people think you're a wizard. And if there's one thing Rome does well, it's dealing with magic. With fire. Sleep, when it finally comes, is the kind that doesn't heal. You close your eyes to the sound of distant arguing. Maybe vendors, maybe drunkards, maybe the cops themselves debating what to do with you. And you wake to a dim grey sliver of light cutting through the storage room's tiny window like a blade. Your body feels like it's been in a fight. A fish-scented, cobblestone-hitting, anxiety-sweating fight. You roll off the mat, joints popping, straw clinging to your arms, and sit in the stillness of a world that's not your own. And it hits you again. Your phone is gone. hidden beneath a Roman floor tile like a cursed relic in a bad museum exhibit. And with it, any hope of proving who you are or how you got here. For all Rome knows, you're a peasant with performance anxiety and a weird accent. For all you know, you're stuck here forever. But you don't have time to spiral. A knock, soft, deliberate, taps at the doorframe. A young slave, eyes low, hands you a folded tunic and gestures that it's time to go. You don't ask questions. You dress quickly and follow, barefoot on cold tile, the silence between your footsteps oddly loud. Instead of heading to the usual study, you're led through the rear courtyard and into a part of the house you haven't seen before. Stone gives way to wooden beams, and the scent of oil lamps hangs in the air. You're brought to a narrow, dark stairway that descends into a chillier space, a cellar or some kind of storage chamber. There's no welcome sign, but the message is clear. You're not safe upstairs anymore. Quintus is there, pacing beside a table covered in scrolls and wax tablets. He doesn't look at you right away. When he finally does, his face is pinched, his eyes tired. Multiloquenteur, he says. Many are talking. You nod because, yesterday was loud. He gestures to a bench. You sit. He walks over and lays a hand flat on one of the tablets. Hoc non potest humanere, he mutters. This cannot last long. Then, after a pause, he asks the question you've been dreading. Es neverus magus? Are you truly a magician? You flinch. You consider answering with a flat no, but your hesitation fills the space before your words can. Non, you finally say. Non magus alienus. Not a magician, a foreigner. You hope that's enough. Lucius arrives moments later, less grumpy than usual, but still sporting the look of someone deeply irritated by the mere existence of mornings. He gives you a brief once-over and slumps into a seat. A slave brings in water and bread. No one touches it. Then Quintus lays out the new plan. You're going to lay low, stay out of public spaces, avoid temples, avoid questions. He says the word suspicio more than once. Suspicion. Rome, it seems, isn't quick to forget strange displays of glowing rectangles. You nod again and think, okay, exile light. Could be worse. But then Lucius suggests something that makes your heart stop. Carcer. Prison. The word sits on the table like a dead animal. Quintus doesn't answer right away. He rubs his jaw, looking away. Then finally he says, Non, nondum. Not yet. But the idea is out there now, and your stomach knots. Here's your historical fact of the day. Roman prisons weren't institutions for long-term punishment. They were holding cells, dank, dark, rat-infested, used to keep people until trial or execution. You weren't supposed to stay long because no one could stay long. Disease and despair would finish you off before the magistrate even picked up his stylus. You ask slowly, Ubi, carcer? Where is the prison? Quintus frowns but humours you. He draws a quick map in the dust on the floor. A few landmarks you recognise, then a box and a word, Tullianum. You've read that name somewhere. The Mamertine prison. Legendary, lethal, allegedly the place where enemies of the state waited to die. Lucius snorts and says something sarcastic involving the word praetor, which you think refers to the magistrates. Maybe he's mocking their sense of justice, or yours. Either way, it's clear. If someone decides you're a threat, that's where you'll go. The idea of being locked in a hole beneath the forum while people debate your fate over lunch makes you shiver harder than any Roman bath ever could. You two speak up. Possum discedere? Can I leave? Flee is what you really mean. Disappear. Go full ancient fugitive. Quintus tilts his head, then says, Fugere non est solutio. Running is not a solution. And he's right. Because where would you even go? The empire stretches in all directions. The moment you open your mouth outside the city, someone will mark you as foreign, or worse. Even within Rome, you can barely survive a shopping trip. He has another idea. He points to a scroll. Philosophiam. Philosophy. You blink. You just asked if you should go on the run, and he's offering you Plato. Quintus explains slowly that his teacher, an older scholar named Septimus, runs a small group of students in the Subura district. Hidden, discreet. Not the kind of place people come asking questions. He could take you there, maybe pass you off as a mute or a foreign student. Give you something to do while this all cools off. It's absurd. You're barely literate in Latin, And now they want to drop you into a room with toga-clad Socrates fanboys debating the meaning of honour while sipping fig wine. And yet, you nod. Because what else is there? Fringe fact. Rome loved its philosophers, but only as long as they stayed in their intellectual lane. Once they started questioning the gods, the emperor, or the economic system, oops! Suddenly people started falling down staircases or accidentally choking on grapes. The rest of the day passes in quiet tension. Quintus gives you a primer on basic phrases. Lucius dozes in the corner, and you try not to imagine what a Roman dungeon smells like. That evening, Quintus leaves briefly and returns with a new tunic for you. Plainer, rougher, less suspicious. He hands you a scroll and says, Legere tenta. Try to read. You spend an hour stumbling through it. He doesn't laugh. Later in the dark, you whisper to yourself over and over, Non magus, discipulus, alienus, non periculosus. Not a magician, a student, a foreigner, not dangerous, a prayer, a mantra, a lie you hope becomes the truth. The Subura is alive before dawn. It's the kind of place that never really sleeps. It just lowers its volume to a murmur, and then ramps right back up with the sun. Chickens cluck underfoot, dogs bark at shadows, vendors yell like it's their only hobby, and the air already tastes like hot stone, sour wine, and faint desperation. This is the Roman slum, the beating, grimy heart of the city where fire breaks out monthly, and no one's ever not yelling about something. If you thought you looked out of place in the Forum here in the Subura, you're practically a circus act. Quintus leads the way, head down, moving through the crush of bodies with that Roman confidence that says don't touch me unless you want to eat curb. You're trying to mimic him, shoulders square, gaze forward, but you keep catching smells you wish you hadn't, and every fourth person that bumps into you feels like a potential mugger or amateur assassin. If anyone notices the faint aura of, this man recently buried an iPhone, they don't say anything. After 20 minutes of navigating alleys, shouting beggars, and a group of children having a very aggressive stick fight, you arrive at a nondescript door wedged between two leaning buildings that look like they gave up on standing straight decades ago. Quintus knocks once, then again, in some rhythm that probably isn't secret code but still feels mildly dramatic. The door opens. An older man stands there, bald except for two wild tufts of hair that have formed a kind of permanent halo around his temples. His eyes are sharp and suspicious, and his nose is the kind that could have its own postal address. This, apparently, is Septimus. He looks at you like he's already disappointed in your entire bloodline. Quintus speaks to him rapidly in Latin, gesturing vaguely at you with the tone of a man explaining that he brought a stray home and swears it won't poop on the carpet. Septimus listens, grunts, then steps aside. You're in. The inside is dim and surprisingly quiet. There's a courtyard beyond the entry hall with a few other men and boys, students you assume, lounging on benches with scrolls in their laps and expressions ranging from bored to smug. One of them glances up at you, snorts, and returns to drawing circles in the dust with his toe. You're already popular. Quintus says a few last words to Septimus and then clasps your arm. Disir, setes, sim, he says. Learn, but keep silent. You nod, and then he's gone, swallowed by the noise of the Subura as quickly as he arrived. You're alone now. Septimus eyes you again, then gestures to a bench. You sit. It's not comfortable, but you've grown used to discomfort by now. It's part of the Roman ambience. He places a scroll in your hands, clearly expecting you to do something useful with it. You try to read the opening line. Virtus in media stat. Virtue lies in the middle. Something like that. You say it aloud, slowly, badly. Septimus doesn't respond. He just moves on to the next student, muttering something under his breath that might be, Gods help us. The lesson begins. It's philosophy, yes, but it's also public speaking, ethics, logic, more like ancient TED talks being tested out live. One student stands and reads a passage from Seneca, fumbling the grammar and drawing sighs from the rest. Another counters with a quote from Cicero and tries to launch into a rant about the nature of justice. You catch about every fifth word, but the performance is unmistakable. These aren't just students. They're future lawyers, orators, politicians. They're sharpening their tongues like swords, and you're here with a butter knife and a concussion. You try to stay quiet, nod at appropriate times, and look less confused than you are. It works, until Septimus points at you. 2, he says. Ew. You sit frozen. A bead of sweat trickles down your back. He tosses a short passage at you, 2 lines, maybe 3, and says, "Ledge." Read. You take the scroll. Your hands are shaking, but you do your best. "Homo sum humani nihil a me alienum puto," you say slowly, tripping on the vowels. "I am human. Nothing human is alien to me." The irony of that line almost makes you laugh. Septimus squints. The other students look up, more surprised than impressed. One snickers. "Loqui potes?" Septimus asks. "You can speak." You hesitate. You nod. "Param," you say. "A little." And just like that, the mask cracks. Septimus leans forward, curious now. He asks where you're from. You answer with your usual vague gestures westward. He asks what you know. You say not much. He nods slowly, then says something that stops you cold. "Barbarous S?" You pause. He's asking if you're a barbarian. Not just a foreigner, but the other, the uncivilized. The chaos outside the gates of Rome. You shake your head. "Discipulus sum," you say. "I am a student." There's a silence. Then Septimus lets out a single dry chuckle. "Omnes sumus," he mutters. "We all are." From there, he doesn't press you further. You're allowed to stay, if you can keep up. The rest of the lesson is less terrifying, more engaging. You even understand a few arguments. You scribble notes. You ask a question, quietly, clumsily, but it's still a question. A few of the students glance at you like you've grown a second head, but one actually nods, impressed or amused, you can't tell. Here's a historical wrinkle. The Subura, while known for its danger and squalor, was also a melting pot of ideas. Philosophers, radicals, playwrights, all rubbing elbows with beggars and criminals. It was messy but fertile ground for thoughts that could one day upset empires. Later, during a break, one of the younger students, thin, sharp-nosed, smug in that teen genius kind of way, sidles up to you. "You're not from anywhere near here," he says in Latin, eyeing you like a puzzle. You try to play dumb. He smirks. "Don't worry," he says. "Philosophy welcomes madness." You're not sure if that's reassuring or a veiled threat, but either way, he offers you a piece of fig, and you accept. As the sun sets, Septimus dismisses the group with a wave. You stand slowly, sore and drained, but something in your chest feels stronger. Not hope, not yet, but maybe a shape that could become it. You walk home with Quintus through the darkening streets, him asking questions, you answering in fragments. He seems pleased. At the gate of the domus, he turns and says, "Fortasse tibi locus hic est." Perhaps there is a place for you here. You nod, grateful, but part of you knows better. You might have a seat in the school, a straw mat to sleep on, a few words of Latin carved into your brain, but you're still a stranger. And Rome never forgets a stranger with a secret. You don't plan on getting dragged into a religious ceremony the next morning, but, well, this is Rome, and plans are more like polite suggestions the gods ignore while they set everything on fire. It starts innocently enough. Quintus hands you a scroll over the breakfast and says something about a festival. You hear the words sacrum and templum and assume it's another quiet little visit to drop off some bread and maybe pretend to understand a prayer. Wrong, so very wrong. By mid-morning, you're being herded down a wide avenue crammed with people, banners, incense smoke and oxen covered in gold leaf paint. The whole city's out to today. You're jostled shoulder to shoulder with senators, beggars, soldiers, and a man carrying what appears to be an entire cooked pig on a tray. Music fills the air, drums, pipes, something metallic being hit rhythmically, and all around voices chant in rough unison. You can't understand most of it, but it doesn't sound like the fun kind of hymn. You're attending a sacrificium publicum, a public ritual offering to the gods, in this case Jupiter himself. The people of Rome are asking for favour. You, meanwhile, are just trying not to vomit on a priest. You and Quintus push through the crowd toward the Capitoline Hill, where the great temple of Jupiter looms like a marble mountain. The structure is massive, columns thick as tree trunks, banners flapping in the wind, and a set of stairs designed specifically to ruin your knees. You climb them anyway. There's no backing out now. At the top, you're nearly blinded by the sheer spectacle. Bright fabrics ripple from the walls. Fire blazes in braziers on either side of the altar. A line of priests in white robes chant steadily, while waving bronze instruments that clang with every step. The centerpiece is a pristine white bull decorated with garlands and standing so still it almost doesn't seem real. The crowd falls quiet. A high priest steps forward. He's ancient, bald, stern and radiating that "I talk to gods, what do you do" energy. He raises his hands. The chanting stops. The air holds its breath. Then he begins the invocation, speaking Latin with the fluidity and power of a man who's been doing this longer than you've been alive. Probably longer than the invention of door hinges. The priest raises a curved knife. You realise with sudden clarity that the bull is not a guest of honour. It's the main course. You look to Quintus, wide-eyed. He gives you a glance that says, "Don't freak out," which is not at all helpful. The priest completes the chant. 2 assistants step forward, and before you can even process it, the knife comes down, clean and brutal. The bull collapses. Blood pools rapidly, dark and steaming across the stone floor. You're too shocked to speak. The smell hits next, sharp, metallic, overwhelming. A wave of nausea crashes over you. You stumble backward, bumping into a richly dressed matron who hisses at you like you just kicked her sandals. You mutter an apology, then realise you're shaking. Here's your historical fact of the day. Roman sacrifice was not symbolic. It was literal, blood, guts, and divine transaction. You gave to the gods, they gave back. If they didn't? Clearly someone messed up the ritual and heads would roll. This wasn't about faith, it was about order. Debt. Obligation. And now you're in the splash zone. The priest begins inspecting the bull's liver, calling out words you don't understand but recognise from your dusty mental file labelled bad omens. People murmur, frown, a few cross themselves. Something's off. The priest glances at the crowd and locks eyes with you. Just for a moment, it's nothing. A flicker. But it sends a chill down your back. He says something quietly to an assistant, who nods and vanishes into the crowd. Quintus doesn't notice. He's still watching the ceremony with the calm interest of a man who isn't being mentally filed under possible sacrificial contaminant. You try to look inconspicuous. You fail. You're sweating, your tunic's crooked, and you're standing like someone who recently witnessed his first state-sponsored cow murder. You edge toward the back of the crowd, hoping distance equals safety. Then the assistant returns, and he's pointing at you. "Tu ibi," he says sharply. "You. There." People turn, you feel the heat of their stares, your throat tightens. "Cur," you ask, trying to keep your voice steady. "Why?" The assistant just repeats the command, louder this time. "Venias." Quintus steps between you and the priest's man, saying something low and quick. There's an argument, brief but tense. Words like superstitio and auspicia get tossed around. You don't catch all of it, but it's clear they think your presence has soured the ritual. Bad signs, unfavourable omens. Your face is officially associated with a messed up sacrifice. Fun, fringe fact. Romans believed in haruspicy, divining the will of the gods by examining animal organs, especially the liver. If the liver looked wrong, someone or something had offended the gods. And when the ritual went sideways, they didn't blame the knife. They blamed people, foreigners, strangers like you. Quintus is arguing hard now. The priest's assistant seems unconvinced. You hear the word interrogatio, questioning. Your chest tightens. Then a loud voice cuts through the air. "Satis! Nuff!" Everyone freezes. The high priest has stepped forward again. He glares at the assistant, then turns to you. Slowly he raises a hand in a dismissive wave. "Discadat," he says. "Let him go." The assistant bows, reluctantly. Quintus grabs your arm and pulls you into the crowd, moving fast. You stumble down the steps, almost twisting your ankle, and don't stop moving until you're several blocks away, bent over in an alley, gasping for breath. Quintus doesn't say anything. He just stands beside you, arms crossed, as you try not to throw up. Finally, he mutters, "Diorum oculi indesunt." The god's eyes are on you. Wholesome, no pressure. There's a quiet moment. Then, in a tone that's not entirely joking, he adds, "Si iterum tea templum ducum me occidit." "If I ever bring you to a temple again, kill me." You both laugh, weakly, but it's still laughter. Maybe that said something. That night, as you scrub the faint metallic scent of blood off your skin and lie awake staring at the ceiling, you wonder what exactly they saw in that liver. What omen? What sign? And what happens next if the gods really are watching you? The next morning brings bruised skies and a humid weight in the air that makes everything stick to everything else. Your tunic, your hair, your dignity. You wake up groggy and ache-limbed on the straw mat. muscles stiff from standing in the shadow of angry priests and nearly becoming the centerpiece in a celestial blame game. It's not even light yet, but there's already clattering in the courtyard and the sharp bark of commands drifting through the open shutters. You sit up, groaning, and that's when you hear it. Marching, not the polite shuffle of sandals on tile, not the sleepy stumble of a slave beginning his day. No, this is synchronized, rhythmic, heavy, boots, lots of them, military. You peek through the slatted window and spot them. Rows of Roman soldiers in uniform, moving in that tight, terrifying formation like they were born to stomp people into obedience. Your stomach drops. Quintus knocks once before entering, which is generous given he technically owns the room and you're the weird stray he let in. He's already dressed, serious. He throws a bundle at you, a thicker tunic, darker fabric, and a belt. Indue, he says, put it on. You don't argue. You're not going to school today, he adds, carefully, in slow Latin. You're coming with me. To where, you ask. He hesitates. Castra, the military camp. You pause mid-tunic. Why? He sighs, and sits beside you. Every Roman citizen must train. Even me, and my father's friend, Centurion, he asked me to bring someone. He eyes you. A volunteer. You try to process that. You've been mistaken for a barbarian, accused of sorcery, nearly sacrificed, and now someone wants you to play soldier. Optimus, he says with a smirk. He thinks you look like someone who needs discipline. You open your mouth to protest, then shut it. Because what's the alternative? Stay here and be remembered as the guy who cursed a temple? At least in a camp. Maybe you blend into a crowd. Maybe. By mid-morning, you're walking the main road out of the city, flanked by Quintus and two other young men, both cousins or childhood friends, judging by their way too relaxed attitudes. One keeps glancing at you like you're a walking novelty. The other just grins every time you trip on your own borrowed sandals. The road eventually leads to a massive fortified space beyond the city walls. The Castra. Roman military camps are basically cities within cities. Gridded streets, barracks, walls, a central command. Everything built with terrifying precision. You'll wave through the gates without fanfare. Soldiers barely glance at you, which is comforting, for now. You pass training yards, rows of practice dummies, and young men hammering away with wooden swords. The air is filled with shouting, grunting, and the occasional thwack of someone being dramatically humbled by a wooden spear to the stomach. And then you meet Optimus. He's the centurion Quintus warned you about. Square jaw, square shoulders, square personality. He has the look of a man who once fought a bear for sport and still complains that the bear didn't try hard enough. He sizes you up like you're a disappointing loaf of bread. This is the one? He grunts at Quintus. Quintus nods, already regretting it. Optimus barks something incomprehensible and gestures for you to step forward. You do. He circles you, then pokes your shoulder. You soft, he says in slow, heavily accented Latin, clearly for your benefit. You run, you sweat, you maybe don't die. Encouraging, and so it begins. Your introduction to the Roman military lifestyle is not gentle. First, you run. A lot. In circles, on gravel, in heat that feels like a slow roast. Quintus jogs beside you at first, clearly used to this. You, on the other hand, last about 15 minutes before your lungs feel like raisins and your legs are filing for separation. Then come the drills. A thick wooden sword is shoved into your hands. It's heavier than it looks and completely unbalanced. You're expected to swing it at a post repeatedly, while Optimus yells things like, "Strike like you mean it," and "Pretend the post is your enemy, not yourself." You hit the post, it barely moves, your arms ache, you hit it again, and again and again. Historical fact. Roman military training was brutal on purpose. Soldiers were drilled with weapons twice as heavy as the real ones, so when it came time for actual combat, the real gear felt like feathers. And they trained constantly, marching, stabbing, constructing siege weapons, building roads. Being a Roman legionary wasn't just a job, it was a lifelong government-sponsored workout program with death as a bonus feature. You're eventually dragged to the javelin range. Someone hands you a pilum, a long, thin spear designed to bend on impact so enemies couldn't throw it back. You're told to throw it at a straw dummy. You do, it sails about 4 feet, droops mid-air, and lands like a depressed stick of spaghetti. The soldiers nearby try not to laugh. One fails. By midday, you're covered in sweat, dust, and what might be a bruise in the exact shape of a training sword handle. Optimus finally waves you off with a grunt. "You're not dead," he says. "Try again tomorrow." You nod weakly, then nearly collapse against a water barrel. Quintus tosses you a piece of bread. "Not bad," he says. "You only fell down twice." 3 times, you mumble, chewing slowly. The bread tastes like sawdust and failure. As you sit, slouched and sore, you realise something strange. No one here cares where you're from. The soldiers have their own problems, their own routines. To them, you're just another skinny recruit who needs muscle and a miracle. There's something comforting about that. You're anonymous again. Not the barbarian, not the magician, just the guy who threw a pilum like a sad noodle. Fringe fact for the day. Non-citizens could actually earn Roman citizenship by serving in the army. After 25 years, you got land, money, and a legal status upgrade, if you survived. Big if. On the way back into the city, Quintus is quiet. Not distant, just thoughtful. Finally, he says, "Optimus thinks you should return next week. He says he's never seen someone so determined to fail." You both laugh. For once, it doesn't feel forced. That night, muscles aching in places you didn't know had names, you lie on your mat and think, maybe this is good. Hard, yes. Painful, absolutely. But stabilizing. A place to disappear in plain sight. Until, of course, someone remembers the glowing box under the floor. Until someone decides you're not just another sweaty trainee, but a threat. Because in Rome, military drills are preparation. But you're already at war. It's been 3 days since you survived Optimus's ancient CrossFit nightmare, and your thighs still feel like they've been trampled by elephants. Not metaphorical elephants. Actual, Carthaginian war elephants with something to prove. Every stair, every curb, every uneven cobblestone feels personal now. And Rome being Rome is basically built entirely out of uneven cobblestones. Quintus finds you're limping hysterical. Lucius just offers you wine and a slow shake of the head like you've disappointed him on a spiritual level. Still, there's no time to recover. Quintus wakes you early with the kind of smug cheerfulness only possible from someone not in pain and says you're going back to the Subura today. You groan but follow. The philosophy lessons continue. Septimus has warmed to you slightly, which means now he insults your pronunciation less and only scolds you when you confuse virtue with manure, which happens more than you'd like to admit. But today, something's different. You arrive at the courtyard classroom, and Septimus isn't alone. A stranger stands beside him, tall, pale, with dark hair, and the kind of face that makes you think of marble busts and suspicious motivations. He's dressed well, too well for the Subura. His eyes land on you immediately and narrow just slightly. You don't like that. "This is Gaius Marcellus," Septimus says, introducing the man like you should be impressed. "He funds this school, occasionally takes an interest." You nod politely, trying to channel the ancient Roman equivalent of "nice to meet you, please don't ruin my life." Gaius nods in return, but doesn't smile. "So, yai," he says in smooth, practiced Latin, "this is the student from nowhere." Every muscle in your body goes on alert. Septimus must notice because he quickly steers the conversation toward ethics and the moral obligations of the state, and soon the other students are debating loudly about justice while pretending not to sneak glances at you. Gaius stays quiet, just watching. Occasionally he scribbles something onto a wax tablet. You don't like that either. When the lesson ends, the other students scatter, and you start to pack up your things, thinking you've dodged whatever bullet that was. Wrong again. "Walk with me," Gaius says, already moving toward the street. It's not a suggestion. Septimus gives you the barest nod, which either means go along with it, or you're probably already dead, so what's one more walk? You catch up to Gaius as he strides through the alleys of the Subura like he owns them, which, honestly, he might. "You've made quite a ripple," he says. "The priests know your face, the magistrates know your name, well, your attempt at a name, and still you wander freely." You stay silent. You don't trust your Latin not to betray you. He smirks. "You're clever not to speak. Every word is a clue, and some of us are good at solving puzzles." You swallow hard. You're being tested, and you know it. He stops suddenly at a small fountain, where a beggar is rinsing his hands. Gaius tosses the man a coin, waits for him to limp off, then turns back to you. "Tell me," he says, softer now. Where are you really from? You take a breath. Far away, you say simply. He nods like he expected that, but not just foreign, different. He tilts his head. Do you know what people whisper about you? Magician, spirit spy. He shrugs. The truth doesn't matter. The perception does. That part you understand all too well. Then he leans in just slightly and adds, if I wanted, I could hand you to the urban prefect today. You'd be in the Tullianum by nightfall. No trial, no delay. But, he pauses, I don't want to. You blink. Why not? He finally smiles, because I think you're useful, unusual. A tool I might need one day. Ah, there it is. He steps back. I'm going to give you some advice, he says. Rome is a theatre. Everyone's acting. Senators, soldiers, priests, even street vendors play a role. The key to surviving here is learning your part and playing it well. You nod slowly, filing that under things I did not learn in public school. Gaius claps you on the shoulder like an old friend. Keep your secrets, but know that I'm watching, not out of malice, just habit. And if you ever find yourself in trouble, and you will, remember my name. I can be very helpful or very dangerous. And then he walks away just like that, leaving you next to a mossy fountain and a lingering feeling that you've just met a man who's either going to save your life or end it. Historical fact, patronage was everything in Rome. Power wasn't just about wealth or bloodlines, it was about connections. The more powerful the person backing you, the safer you were. Gaius Marcellus clearly is power. The question is whether you're a project, a pawn, or a future liability. You return to Quintus's house later, exhausted, your thoughts a tangled mess. Lucius is drinking in the atrium again and waves you over. Sit, he says. You look like someone who saw the emperor naked. You sit. You don't speak. Lucius sips his wine. Quintus says you've impressed Septimus. You shrug. Maybe. He grins. Don't get cocky. He praises sparrows before he eats them. You manage a laugh. It's weak but real. Later that night you sit on the edge of your straw mat, staring at the floor tile beneath which your phone still sleeps. You haven't touched it in days, haven't even dared to check if the battery's holding out. It's safer that way, safer for everyone. But part of you itches, wants to press that button, wants to see the glow, a reminder that you came from somewhere else, that all of this, Rome, temples, sacrifices, politics, it's real but it's not yours. And yet, it's starting to feel like maybe it is. Maybe. Fringe fact for today, in some mystery cults of Rome, initiates were told they had to die before being reborn. Symbolically, yes. But sometimes it wasn't just metaphor. You're starting to feel like you're going through one of those rites, minus the robes and chanting. You lie back, watching shadows play on the ceiling. Today you met power. Tomorrow you might need it. You don't mean to end up in the middle of a battle. Honestly, you'd planned on spending the day reviewing Latin declensions and maybe limping through another hour of Optimus's military boot camp disguised as training. But Rome, in its endless enthusiasm for chaos, has a way of derailing your plans and replacing them with near-death experiences. Today is no different. It begins when Quintus wakes you at dawn unusually tense. He doesn't speak right away, just tosses you a tunic that's heavier than usual and gestures to hurry. You ask groggily, what happened? He mutters something about unrest and volunteers, then adds, we are being sent to support the Vigiles. The Roman Fire Brigade. You blink, confused. No fire, he clarifies. Rebellion. You sit up. Rebellion where? He doesn't answer. He just hands you your belt and a short wooden club that feels wildly inadequate for anything you'd call a rebellion. Within an hour you're marching with 24 young men, students, off-duty soldiers, even merchants' sons toward the edge of the Subura, where the city begins to thin out into workshops, tenement blocks, and taverns that double as fight clubs. The problem apparently is a labour riot. A group of cart pullers and dock workers protesting over rising grain prices and what they claim are illegal taxes from a local magistrate. Word is, it started with a peaceful march, but someone threw a rock, then someone threw a body. Now it's a full-scale brawl. You arrive at a wide-open plaza just in time to see a mob hurling insults and objects at a line of heavily armoured soldiers. There are torches, clubs, pitchforks, and more than one angry man holding a spade like he means it. The soldiers shout orders, shields bang together. The air is thick with tension, dust, and the unmistakable scent of too many bodies packed into too small a space. You feel it before anything starts, the moment before a thunderstorm when even your bones know something's coming. Then someone in the crowd screams, "Servitium Romanum est! We are Rome's slaves!" And just like that it explodes. The mob surges forward. Rocks fly, soldiers charge. You don't even have time to brace before someone shoves you and suddenly you're stumbling forward into a human hurricane. Quintus yells something behind you, but it's lost in the roar. You duck a swinging torch, elbow a man out of your path, and end up in the middle of the chaos, clutching your useless wooden club like it might turn into a sword if you believe hard enough. Here's a sobering historical fact. Roman mobs weren't just angry, they were organised. These were people who built ships, carried marble slabs, and dragged goods across the empire. They were strong, fed up, and desperate. And desperate people fight hard. You swing once, blindly, and hit someone's shoulder. You're shoved sideways into a crate. You fall, roll, scramble to your feet, and immediately dodge another club aimed straight at your skull. You run, no strategy, just instinct, and duck into a narrow alley that reeks of sour beer and ash. You lean against the wall, panting, heart in your throat. You're not a soldier, you never were, and if you stay out there, you're going to die in a riot started over spoiled bread and unpaid wages. But then you hear something that stops you. Quintus shouting your name. You poke your head out. He's pinned between two angry dock workers, one holding a rusted meat hook, the other gripping a length of chain like he knows how to use it. Quintus has his club up but looks cornered. Without thinking, you charge back in. The first man doesn't see you coming. You slam your club into his ribs and he crumples with a gasp. The second swings the chain. It wraps around your arm with a sting, but you yank it hard and pull him off balance. Quintus takes the chance to crack his club across the man's face. Blood sprays. He drops. Quintus grabs your wrist and pulls you backward. "Stultusis!" he yells. You're an idiot. You both stumble away from the fray, weaving through alleyways until the noise fades behind you. When you finally stop, your arm is bleeding, your breath is ragged, and your tunic looks like it lost a war. Quintus is leaning against a wall, panting, but he grins. "Non omnino inutilis," he says. Not completely useless. You laugh once, sharp and surprised, then wince. Your ribs hurt more than they should. Something's definitely bruised. You return to the camp limping, bruised, and soaked in sweat. The centurion, Optimus, watches you approach with a raised eyebrow. "You didn't die," he says flatly. "Impressive." He tosses you a flask. You don't ask what's in it, you just drink. Fringe fact, the vigils, while known primarily as firemen, often acted as a kind of night watch and riot control. Understaffed and poorly equipped, they'd recruit civilians for backup, especially during festivals or periods of unrest. Sometimes those civilians became heroes, sometimes they just vanished. That night you return to Quintus's domus in silence. No jokes, no laughter, just the quiet creak of sandals on stone and the faint sound of someone weeping in a nearby house. You don't ask. Rome has 100 reasons to cry. Lucius is waiting in the atrium. He takes one look at your bloody sleeve and says, "Fun day?" You give him a tired thumbs up. He pours you a cup of wine. As you drink, you think about the men you saw, the fear in their eyes, the fury, the hopelessness. Rome may look like marble and glory from the outside, but inside it's just another system teetering on the edge, and the edge is closer than anyone wants to admit. That night, lying on your mat, your ribs throbbing, your arm wrapped in a wine-soaked rag, you stare at the ceiling and realise something horrifying. You didn't just survive your first battle, you fought in it, and worse, you might have been good at it. The bruise across your ribs has gone from angry purple to something murkier, like old wine spilled on stone. Breathing hurts, laughing is a punishment. But the worst part is your feet. Days in cheap sandals on sun-baked cobblestones, darting between alleys and tripping through violent mobs have turned your souls into something between ground meat and a cautionary tale. You consider asking Lucius for advice, but he'll probably just hand you more wine and say, "Have you tried walking better?" You try to rest, yes, but Rome won't let you. Not 20 minutes after you settle into a shady corner of the courtyard with a fig and a half-eaten hunk of cheese, a messenger shows up. A young slave with a nervous posture and sandals too big for his feet hands you a rolled scroll and a muttered, "From Septimus." Then he's gone. You'll open the scroll and your heart sinks. It's short, stiff, and smells faintly of mildew, but the meaning is clear. Come at once. There has been an incident. You limp to the Subura, every step reminding you that yesterday involved punching a man with a chain and possibly bruising something essential. You arrive at the school to find Septimus pacing under the portico, flanked by a handful of students who look equal parts curious and horrified. Gaius Martellus is there, of course, because wherever something goes wrong, he's either behind it or making sure no one thinks he is. Septimus waves you over with a grim expression. "Someone broke into the study last night," he says. "Scrolls were stolen. One was burned." You blink. "Why?" Gaius answers instead. "Because knowledge is dangerous, especially when it doesn't come with the state's approval." He says it with that same maddening calm he always carries, like he's delivering gossip over olives instead of announcing a literary arson. You glance at the others, who are all whispering in clumps, one of them pointing at the wall where soot still stains the plaster. "Was anyone hurt?" you ask. "No," says Septimus, "but the message was clear." He doesn't explain what the message was. He doesn't have to. The destroyed scroll wasn't just any text. It was a banned piece of philosophical writing. Something about the equality of all men. A dangerous idea in a city where hierarchy is sacred and slaves outnumber citizens. And the rumours are spreading already. Someone saw a shadow, someone else swears it was a foreigner. Someone predictably whispers barbarous again. You stiffen, because the wrong person hears that, and suddenly the word isn't just an insult, it's an accusation. Gaius steps closer, lowering his voice. "You were seen during the riot, defending a citizen, bleeding in public. You're already a topic. And now this happens?" You clench your jaw. "You think I did it?" "No," he says, "but I think someone might say you did." That's worse. Here's your historical fact of the day. The Roman elite loved their philosophy, until it stopped agreeing with them. Stoics preaching virtue and civic duty? Excellent. But anyone promoting equality, questioning the gods, or undermining the authority of the Senate? Suddenly their homes were searched, their scrolls confiscated, and their lives shortened significantly. The line between teacher and traitor was as thin as a senator's patience. Septimus turns to you. "I need you to help me," he says. "There's a hidden archive beneath the study. A vault. I haven't used it in years, but it's time." You follow him and Gaius down a narrow stone corridor, lit by flickering torches that smell like burning hair. At the end is a locked wooden hatch, cleverly concealed under what looks like just another tile in the floor. Septimus kneels, pries it open, and gestures for you to go down first, naturally. The passage below is narrow and musty, with air so stale it might qualify as a fossil. You descend carefully, nearly slipping on a loose brick, and land in a tiny claustrophobic space lined with crude shelves. Old scrolls, wrapped bundles of parchment, clay tablets, some intact, some eaten by time. This is no ordinary archive. This is a forbidden one. "Take the text marked with red twine," Septimus calls down. "As many as you can carry." You start packing them into a satchel, heavy, fragile knowledge, while your mind races. Who did this? And more importantly, why now? Fringe fact, while the famous Roman libraries were public, they were also heavily curated. Anything too foreign, too subversive, too strange, off the shelves. Some works survived only because individual scholars risked hiding them, copying them in secret, preserving what the state deemed dangerous. You're now part of that chain. Lucky you. You emerge 10 minutes later, arms full, face streaked with dust. Gaius takes one look at you and says, "You look the part now." "What part?" "The conspirator." Not comforting. Back upstairs, the students are gone. Septimus seals the trapdoor again and wipes the soot from his hands. "These will stay with me," he says, lifting the scrolls you saved. "But they can't stay here. The wrong eyes are already watching." Gaius nods. "Then give them to me." You don't like the idea, but Septimus does. He has resources, he says, and a house full of locked rooms. You hand the scrolls over reluctantly. Gaius tucks them into his cloak like a man smuggling secrets, which technically he now is. On your way back home, you and Quintus, who showed up just in time to miss all the action, walk in silence. He's unusually quiet, till finally he says, "Rome is shaking lately." You glance at him. "'Cause of books?" He shrugs. "Books, riots, temples, omens, you..." You smile faintly. "Thanks. I meant that literally. Great. That night, you're too wired to sleep. You sit in the courtyard under a darkening sky, listening to the city. A dog barks. A drunk stumbles past the gate, singing about lost love and stolen sandals. Somewhere in the hills, thunder rolls, distant and vague. And you wonder, how long can you walk this line? You're not Roman, you're not safe, and you're now involved in something much bigger than trying to survive long enough to get decent shoes. You're part of a secret, a dangerous one. And in Rome, secrets don't last, they unravel. You're not awake for long the next morning before everything goes sideways again. And this time it starts with chains, literal ones. The iron kind that clank and rattle in the worst possible way, especially when they're being fastened to your wrists. You're still half asleep on your straw mat when a door bangs open, followed by heavy footsteps and shouting. 3 armed men storm into the storage room, flanked by a grim-faced slave who blurts out your name, your Roman name, Tailorus, in that voice people use when they're about to ruin your life. They seize you before you can speak, before you can even sit up. You try to yell, try to ask what's happening, but one of them jabs the hilt of his sword into your gut, hard enough to knock the air out of your lungs. The room spins. You go down to your knees. When your vision clears, Lucius is in the doorway. He looks more irritated than surprised. "Don't resist," he mutters. "Just go. Try not to look guilty." "I am not guilty," you gasp. He raises a brow. "Then you'll survive the trial. Maybe." You're dragged through the streets like a prize pig, barefoot and half-dressed, with one soldier holding your arm and another keeping a hand on his blade. The people of Rome aren't subtle. They point, whisper. One woman hisses and spits on the ground. A vendor you once bought a shriveled fig from shouts, "Barbarous, Magus!" Someone laughs. The chains clank with every step. The sun glares down like a torch held too close to your eyes, and then you see it. The Colosseum. You blink. No, that can't be right. You're not important enough for that. But they're not dragging you toward the arena entrance. They veer off to a smaller, far more grim-looking structure attached to its side, the prison annex. Historical fact time. The Colosseum wasn't just for battles and beast fights. It had holding cells, chambers for condemned prisoners, and a whole subterranean nightmare maze where you could be prepped, punished, or conveniently misplaced. And you're being taken right into its guts. You're thrown into a stone cell. It's dark, it smells like old blood and mould, and the straw is wet, which somehow feels worse than no straw at all. Your wrists ache, your mouth is dry. You call out once. No one answers. Hours pass, or maybe more. It's hard to tell. There's no light, just the occasional flicker of torch glow as someone walks by, accompanied by the distant sound of cheering. A roar rises. The crowd above you is watching something die. You're just waiting for your turn. Then the door creaks open. A new figure steps in, tall, broad, and swathed in leather armour. He looks down at you like he's trying to decide whether you're even worth speaking to. "New recruit," he grunts. "Lucky for you, they didn't want blood yet." He tosses a bundle at you. It's a tunic. Rough, stained, reeking of sweat. You recognise it before you even unfold it. Gladiator gear. "What?" you say, voice hoarse. "You're not important enough for a proper execution," the man says, "so they're giving you a chance." A chance at what? He grins, humourless. Entertainment. And just like that, you're conscripted into Rome's most beloved reality show. Fringe fact, not all gladiators were trained professionals. Many were condemned prisoners, criminals or debtors thrown into the ring for the public's amusement. They were called damnati ad ludum, condemned to the games. Their job wasn't to win, it was to die, interestingly. You're hauled out the next morning cleaned, oiled, don't ask, and shoved into a sandpit alongside the other equally terrified men. The arena is smaller than the Grand Colosseum, an off-site practice ground, but the energy is the same. You can hear the distant crowd warming up, cheering at some poor soul fighting a bear or a very committed man dressed like one. Next to you stands a man with shoulders like a marble statue and a face like he's been punched by history. He grunts and says, "Gaius," offering a hand. You take it. "Tailorus," you answer. "First time?" You nod. He smirks. "You'll be fine if you stay behind me." Then comes the training, which is really just the instructors throwing wooden swords at you and yelling in Greek. You're taught how to fall, how to bleed, how to scream convincingly. Actual survival techniques, not high on the curriculum. You're paired with Gaius for sparring. He knocks you down 5 times before you land a single clumsy jab. He nods approvingly when you don't cry. By nightfall, your body feels like it was used as a demonstration for what not to do with your ribs. You're given stale bread, a handful of olives, and a water skin that tastes like rust and wine. Historical debate. Some scholars argue that certain condemned men, if they impressed in the arena, could earn a kind of celebrity status. They'd be given names, fans, and maybe even freedom. Others argue that was rare propaganda, used to keep the masses entertained and the condemned hopeful. You don't know which side is right, but you know one thing, you're on the schedule. Tomorrow you're going into the arena, not the big one, thank Jupiter, but a public match all the same. A crowd, a weapon, a fight, probably staged, hopefully. As you lie on your stone cot in the cell staring at the rough ceiling, Gaius mutters from across the room. Got any gods you like? You pause. Not sure? He nods. Pick one, pray, can't hurt. So you do. You whisper a prayer to anyone listening. Not for glory, not for vengeance, just for a short fight and a long life. Because tomorrow you're going to bleed for Rome, and if you don't do it well, they'll make sure it's your last performance. Morning arrives fast, cruel and loud. Trumpets blare somewhere above you. Short, sharp blasts that seem designed to make your spine clench in terror. You jolt awake on the cold stone of your cell, your mouth dry and sticky with the taste of old wine and fear. Gaius, your burly, onion-scented cellmate, is already up, stretching like someone excited for the worst day of your life. Today's the day, he says with a grin that reveals exactly 3 teeth. You sit up slowly. Everything hurts. The kind of hurt that makes you wonder whether your body's signed a pact with the gods behind your back to quietly kill you. Your legs ache from drills, your ribs still complain from the riot, and your shoulders feel like they're made of wet gravel. But none of it compares to the dull knot of dread pressing into your gut like a stone. The guards come in with your gear, if you can call it that. A battered leather chest wrap that looks like it's lost more fights than it's won, a short gladius that wobbles slightly at the hilt, and a tiny rectangular shield you could use to serve charcuterie at best. You strap it all on like a child playing war in a Halloween costume and try not to hyperventilate. They march you through a long corridor that smells like sweat, fear and blood that's been mopped up just enough to pass inspection. You hear the crowd before you see them, cheering, chanting, booing. They're already worked up, their bloodlust warmed and frothing after watching someone get mauled by a boar or humiliated by a slippery net fighter. You're not the main event. You're the snack between courses. Gaius walks beside you, calm and loose. Just stay alive, he says. And don't lose your footing, the sand's deep. How many times have you done this, you ask, trying not to sound like a terrified pigeon. Twice, he says. Once I lost. Once I pretended to lose. He winks. Crowd loved both. You reach the gate. The guards pause. The wooden doors creak open just wide enough for the blinding light of the arena to flood in. You can't see the crowd, just hear them. A throbbing sea of sound. Somewhere in the stands, someone rings a bell, and then you're pushed out. The heat hits first. The midday sun bakes the sand, reflecting upward into your eyes and burning into your skin. You blink rapidly, heart pounding. The arena is smaller than the Colosseum, but to you, it might as well be the centre of the universe. Around you, hundreds of Romans lean forward with wine cups in hand and laughter already on their lips. Your entertainment. Your meat. A voice booms across the field, some announcer shouting your names, though they butcher both of them into something like Te Lu Russ and Gaius the Murderer, and the crowd loves it. You stand in the centre, squinting across the pit. Your opponent is not Gaius. Apparently this is a solo match. You're facing a stocky man in proper bronze armour, with a helmet shaped like a fish. His gladius glints in the sun. He has a real shield. You have a dinner plate and your last regrets. Here's your historical fact of the day. Not all gladiator matches were fights to the death. Sometimes it was about the show, the drama, but the crowd had the power. If they were bored, or if one fighter refused to die interestingly, things could change real fast. The announcer shouts something. The fish helmet man roars and charges. You barely dodge the first swing, instinct kicking in before your brain has time to remind you that you're not built for this. Your gladius scrapes his side just enough to annoy him. He comes back harder. You block with your shield, which cracks at the top, splinters fly, you backpedal, stumbling through sand that sucks at your feet like wet cement. Then Gaius yells from the sideline, "Move left! He's slow on the left!" You do. The next swing misses by inches. You counter. A lucky jab to the gut. The crowd roars. You don't know if they're cheering for you or the blood. Maybe both. Either way, it buys you a few seconds. Your opponent stumbles. You follow up with a weak strike that barely connects. And then he's swinging again. This time wild. Rage is blinding him. You duck, step forward, and slam your shield into his chest. He goes down. Not dead, just stunned. Gasping, hands shaking, you stand over him, blade raised. The crowd howls. This is the moment. The one they talk about in documentaries and Hollywood films. The infamous police verso. The turn of the thumb. The crowd decides. You glance up, half blind with the sweat, trying to read the mob's mood. Some raise fists. Some wave their hands flat. Some chant, "Vive!" Others shout, "Fairy! Kill him!" Then you see it. An official standing at the edge of the arena nodding once. Thumb turned sideways. A signal to you it's your choice. You hesitate. The man below you looks up, dazed. He's older than you thought. His eyes aren't angry. The crowd groans, half disappointment, half grudging respect. The man gasps something like "Gratius" before he's dragged away. You're pulled from the pit minutes later. Gaius meets you in the corridor, clapping your shoulder hard enough to jolt your spine. "Not bad," he says. "They'll remember you." "Will they remember me as weak?" you ask. He snorts. "Nah, as human." You're stripped of your armour, handed a fresh tunic, and marched back to your cell. But you're not chained this time. That's new. A few hours later, a guard appears with a message. One word, Liberatus. You stare at him. What? "Gaius Marcellus paid your release," the guard grunts. "Said you had potential, said he'd rather you be useful than dead." Your stomach twists, because being free in Rome, especially when someone buys your freedom, doesn't mean you're safe. It means you owe someone. Historical debate alert. The exact rules around gladiator release varied, but manumission, being freed, was possible, especially if someone influential vouched for you. But freedom often came with strings. Political ones, bloody ones. You exit the training ground dazed, bruised, and alive. You didn't kill, you didn't die. But now you belong to Gaius Marcellus. And that might be worse. You don't return to Quintus's domus right away. Gaius Marcellus insists you come with him first. No discussion, no option to limp home and cry in the bath. His personal guard, two humorless slabs of meat in fancy armour, flank you as he leads the way through Rome's narrow alleys and chaotic markets. People make space for him, not because he's famous, necessarily, but because he walks like someone who could ruin your life with a smile and a scroll. His villa is far from the grime of the Subura. You're taken across the Tiber to the quieter Aventine Hill, where homes grow taller, gardens greener, and the air starts to smell less like urine and more like roasted pine nuts. The street outside his house is lined with imported statues. Bronze, marble, probably stolen from somewhere, and his front door has iron studs that seem to whisper, "Don't even think about it." You limp across a mosaic floor so clean you feel bad bleeding on it. The atrium echoes with silence. You pass slaves who don't meet your eyes. This place is too quiet, too polished, too sharp around the edges. Even the air feels filtered. Gaius leads you into a room that's part study, part war room. Scrolls line the walls, but so do maps, military tokens, and a few trophies that look suspiciously like other people's weapons. He waves you to a bench and finally speaks. "You performed well today," he says, pouring himself a glass of something that glows amber in the light. "And you made the right choice. The crowd likes mercy." You nod cautiously. "Thank you for the release." He waves it off like you just thanked him for passing the salt. "Consider it an investment. You're not free, you're useful, and you're not a gladiator. Not anymore. At least not unless I need you to be one again." You don't like that phrasing? Not one bit. He takes a seat across from you, steepling his fingers like a man about to offer either employment or blackmail. "You're interesting," he says. "You're foreign, clearly, but you've adapted. You've learned. And you have secrets." You stiffen. "I don't need to know where you're from," he continues. "Not yet. But Rome is a city of favours, of debts, of games. I helped you. Now you help me. How, you ask, your voice rough and tired. He smiles thinly. There's a man, Senator Arminius Claudius, a pompous fool with bad poetry and worse taste in friends. He's been a thorn in my side for months, blocking my trade routes, questioning my political alliances, and most recently suggesting that my patronage of certain philosophers amounts to sedition. You blink. That last bit hits too close. He's hosting a gathering tomorrow night, Gaius says. I need someone inside, someone beneath notice, someone who can listen without being listened to. You'll go. You want to say no. You want to say, I'm not a spy, I'm a time traveller with a liberal arts degree and a death wish. But you just nod, because saying no in Gaius's house feels like the last word you'll ever say. He claps once. A slave appears and hands you a new tunic. Plain, slightly frayed, exactly the sort of thing a servant would wear. Perfect. You're going undercover. Historical fact. Roman politics was less like a formal system and more like a constant knife fight in a dimly lit hallway. Spying, bribery, blackmail, all were part of the game. Servants, scribes, and even dinner guests were often tools used to undermine rivals. You're just the newest piece on Gaius's board. He offers you a place to sleep for the night. You refuse. He raises an eyebrow but doesn't argue. You make your way back to Quintus's house just before nightfall, bruised, filthy, and trying to forget the sound of a crowd shouting for blood. When the door opens, Lucius nearly drops his wine. Still alive, he says, voice flat with surprise. Barely, you mutter. Quintus appears seconds later, relief all over his face. He pulls you into a rough hug, then immediately checks your ribs, your arms, your face. You didn't kill anyone, he asks. No, you say, but I made some new friends I really regret. You tell them, most of it. Not the scrolls, not the phone, but the arrest, the arena, Gaius's patronage. Quintus listens, arms crossed. Lucius just refills his cup and mutters something about never trust a man with statues of himself. Quintus eventually nods. You're not safe here anymore. I wasn't safe here yesterday. True, but now you're visible. And visible people vanish. That night you barely sleep. Every creak outside your window sounds like sandals scraping across tile. Every breeze through the shutters feels like a ghost finger against your neck. Your muscles twitch with leftover adrenaline, and your mind races with questions. Why you? Why now? What's Gaius planning? And why does it feel like he knows exactly what you're hiding? Somewhere in the middle of the night you rise and creep to the corner of the room where your satchel lies. You lift the tile. The phone is still there, cold, silent. You press the button. It lights up, 2% battery. It might as well be a lifeline. You stare at it for a long time, then turn it off and hide it again. You can't risk the light, the sound, the suspicion. Fringe fact for today, some historians believe the reason so little innovation happened in the Roman Empire, despite its engineering brilliance, was fear. Anything too different, too fast, was seen as a threat to stability. Stability was everything. You are the exact opposite of stability. You lie back down as dawn begins to pale the sky. Tomorrow you'll infiltrate a senator's dinner party, possibly gather dirt for Gaius, and pretend to be invisible in a world that's already starting to see you too clearly. No pressure. You arrive at Senator Arminius Claudius's domus, just as the sun slips behind Rome's jagged skyline, painting the sky in streaks of copper and deep blue. The shadows are long, the air still sticky with the day's heat, and your nerves are about as calm as a sack of snakes. You're dressed in borrowed servant garb, simple brown tunic, plain sandals, and a little cloth belt that says, I belong to someone rich and emotionally unavailable. You look the part. That's the easy part. Acting the part, that's where things get terrifying. The house is massive, of course. Even from the outside, you can tell this isn't a senator who believes in modesty. The gate alone could double as a fortress wall. You're led in through a side entrance by one of Gaius's own men, a mute, hulking servant who smells faintly of olive oil and menace. He gives you a nod and disappears into the dark like some kind of debt-collecting ghost. Inside, everything is polished marble and calculated excess. Golden lamps flicker along the walls, casting long, elegant shadows. Slaves move in perfect formation, like they've been rehearsing their existence. Soft music, lyres and flutes drifts from somewhere deeper in the house, and you catch the faint scent of spiced wine and roasted game. You're not on the guest list, obviously. You're here as part of the furniture. You're assigned to pour wine. Not the worst job, considering the alternatives. Floor sweeper, vomit catcher, or human lantern holder. You nod obediently and take your place near the wall. Amphora in hand, eyes scanning the room like a suspicious owl. The guests filter in slowly. Senators, their wives, hangers-on, and a few foreign dignitaries who look like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. You spot Gaius Marcellus near the rear of the room, reclining with practiced ease, swirling a cup of wine and watching you without watching you. Senator Arminius enters last. He's older than you expected, broad-chested, white-bearded, and draped in so much gold thread he probably glows in direct sunlight. His smile is tight, politician tight, and his laugh comes too fast and too often, like he's trying to prove he's still fun at parties. He makes a grand show of greeting every guest. His voice is deep and clear, and somehow manages to sound smug, even when he's complimenting someone's sandals. Dinner begins. Platters of roasted birds, bowls of pickled vegetables, trays of seafood that look like they're still judging you. You circle the room with your amphora, refilling goblets and trying not to stare at the senator's daughter, who is, let's just say, far too curious about the help. One wrong move and you'll find yourself married or murdered, and you're not sure which would come first. You listen. That's what Gaius told you to do. Listen for rumours, names, anything tied to me or anything that smells like betrayal. At first, all you catch are boring complaints about taxation, garum prices, and the quality of recent mosaics. But eventually, you hear something that sticks. Two men at the far end of the triclinium are speaking in hushed Latin. One is bald, sharp-featured, with the posture of a weasel pretending to be a wolf. The other is younger, fatter, and clearly trying to prove he belongs. They are whispering about Gaius. Funding those underground lectures again, the fat one says, dipping a chunk of bread into honeyed sauce. Septimus's crowd, dangerous talk. The sharp one leans closer. It's not just talk. One of them was found with a scroll that blamed the emperor for the grain shortage. Punishable? If it can be traced. That's why Arminius is pushing the inquiry next week. Inquiry. That's a dangerous word in Rome. You lean a little closer, pretending to top off a goblet. The sharp-featured man eyes you and shifts his cup just enough to show he's noticed. You fill it, nod and move on. Slow, invisible. Here's your historical fact. Roman senators were experts at destroying each other with paperwork. An inquiry could mean anything. An official investigation, a public accusation, or a polite prelude to a very real execution. If Arminius is tying Gaius to seditious material, it means your strange little journey through Roman academia is now officially a crime scene. Later in the evening, as the wine flows like a busted pipe, and everyone starts laughing too loud and leaning too close, Senator Arminius himself calls for a toast. To the future, he says, raising his goblet, may it belong to Rome, and not to those who would poison it from the inside. People cheer. Gaius smiles, but only with his mouth. You slip out a little before the guests begin their customary drunken declamation, where someone inevitably recites Virgil until they puke in the garden. You head to the rear courtyard, where the air is cooler, the stars are sharp above, and the tension in your shoulders finally begins to thaw. That's when you hear footsteps. You turn. It's the senator's daughter. Her eyes glitter. She steps closer. "You're not just a servant," she says softly. Your stomach drops. "I saw you watching my father, listening to everything." You say nothing, because what can you say? She steps even closer. "Tell your master he's not as clever as he thinks." She turns and disappears through a side door, not waiting for your reaction. Fringe fact. In Roman politics, women weren't just accessories. They were informants, manipulators, and sometimes the most dangerous players in the room. If you're being watched by the senator's daughter, you're already in over your head. You exit quietly, slipping down the backhouse where a young boy waits with a lantern. He nods and leads you to a waiting litter. You climb in, silent. You report everything to Gaius later that night. The whispers, the names, the senator's daughter. He says nothing at first, just sips his wine. Then, Arminius thinks he's playing a game. He doesn't know I've changed the rules. You want to ask what that means, but instead you ask, what happens now? Gaius looks at you and says, "Now, we make sure he never gets to call for another inquiry." That's not a metaphor, that's a promise, and you're now part of it. You tell yourself you're going to stay uninvolved, that you'll pass Gaius's information along, nod politely, and back out of this cloak and dagger political circus before it swallows you. You repeat it like a mantra the next morning as you wake to the sharp scent of pine smoke and hear the steady murmuring of Rome starting its daily routine. Carts creaking, sandals slapping on stone, the occasional distant shout of someone already having a bad time. But by mid-morning, you're back at Gaius Marcellus's villa, summoned without explanation, and you already know you've lost whatever war you were fighting against being involved. Gaius doesn't greet you with the usual cryptic smirk. Today he looks serious, his tunic immaculate, his posture sharp. He doesn't waste time with pleasantries either. "I need you to deliver something," he says, handing you a sealed scroll. You glance at it. No markings, thick parchment, wax seal bearing his crest, a falcon over crossed swords. "What is it?" you ask. "A message," he says simply, "to the Emperor." You laugh, like really laugh. Kind of wheezing, incredulous burst that feels too risky to exist within 10 feet of that scroll. He doesn't laugh back. "You're serious?" "Of course." You stare at him. "You want me, a foreigner with a barely passable command of Latin, currently suspected of magical thinking and probable gladiator status, to deliver a message to the Emperor of Rome?" Gaius leans forward. "You're invisible to the powerful. You're perfect." That is either the most flattering insult you've ever received or the least reassuring job interview of your life. Still, you accept the scroll, because what's the alternative? Tell Gaius no? Get buried in the backyard under a tasteful statue? Not appealing. He gives you directions, not to the imperial palace, which is too guarded, too formal, but to a private villa on the outskirts, where the Emperor occasionally escapes the tedium of Senate debates and plague gossip. Apparently Gaius has friends in high places, or leverage. Historical fact, Roman emperors often kept private retreats, sometimes under different names, far from the bureaucracy of the capital, and they used couriers, trusted messengers, to communicate with allies, enemies, and everyone in between. These couriers weren't always soldiers. Sometimes the less obvious the messenger, the better. You leave the city under a sky half filled with clouds that threaten rain but never quite deliver. The road leads east, out through one of the lesser gates, past vineyards and olive groves where labourers pause to wipe sweat from their brows and stare at you like they have just seen a dog walking upright. The villa is a low, sprawling thing. Whitewashed walls, trimmed hedges, too many columns to be subtle. You're stopped at the gate by a guard with a face like a broken clay pot. You hold up the scroll. He takes it without a word and vanishes through a side door. You're left waiting in the courtyard, surrounded by the sound of fountains trickling and birds pretending Rome isn't falling apart in the distance. 10 minutes pass, then 20. You start counting tiles on the floor just to stay awake. Finally, the guard returns. "Come." You're led through a corridor painted with murals of gods doing inappropriate things, and into a small chamber where a single man sits reading. He's older, but not ancient, early 40s maybe, with short cropped hair and a face that manages to look both exhausted and dangerously alert. He doesn't look like an emperor. But then again, what would that even mean? He glances at you once, then takes the scroll and breaks the seal with a bronze blade. He reads in silence, and then very slowly he says, "You're the foreigner." Your blood goes cold. "I suppose I am," you say cautiously. "You've made quite the impression." You're not sure if that's a compliment or a threat. You're betting on threat. The Emperor, or whoever this man is, sets the scroll down and finally looks you in the eye. "Do you know what this says?" You shake your head. He smirks. "Good, because if you did, I'd have to kill you." Comforting. He waves a hand. The guard returns. "Take him to the back," the man says. "Let him eat. He looks half dead." You're not sure if this is mercy or a weird kind of foreplay, but either way you're led through a garden into a shaded pavilion, where a slave offers you bread, cheese, and a cup of watered wine. You eat, because what else can you do? At this point, refusing food might be treason. As you sit, a small older man approaches. He's stooped, clean, dressed in worn but well-made robes. "You're the messenger," he says softly. "Apparently." He glances around. You've stepped into a deeper game than you realise. You nod. That keeps happening. Fringe fact. Many Roman emperors employed unofficial advisors, philosophers, freedmen, even astrologers, who were trusted more than their generals or senators. This man you suspect is one of them, and he's just decided to give you a cryptic pep talk. Gaius plays a dangerous game, the man continues, and you're his newest pawn. You frown. What if I don't want to play? He smiles gently. Too late. You return to the city by nightfall, head spinning. As you walk past the outer slums, the mood shifts. The streets grow louder, rougher. You take a shortcut through the Subura, unwise always, and nearly trip over a drunk sprawled in the middle of the alley. Then you hear it, a voice, too close. "Hey, magic man!" You turn. 3 men stand there, one with a club, another with a dagger, the last just grinning like this is going to be his evening's entertainment. "You cursed the temple, right?" The dagger guy says. "I heard you brought bad omens," made the gods angry. You try to back away. The wall stops you. They step closer. Then there's a shout, and someone barrels into the grinning one from the side, sending him sprawling. You blink, stunned, as the others turn to fight. You catch a glimpse of a familiar face, Quintus swinging a half-broken stool like it's state-issued cavalry equipment. The fight is short and chaotic. Feet fly, someone's nose breaks audibly, and when it's over, the alley is yours again. Quintus is panting. "What did I say about walking alone?" You nod. "That I shouldn't?" He grins, blood on his lip. "Glad you remember." You return to the domus together, your heart still racing. You think about the Emperor, the scroll, the way his eyes seem to see through you. You don't know what the message said. But something changed today. You're not invisible anymore. You're seen. You wake up with a pounding in your temples and the distinct sensation that someone's been whispering secrets directly into your brain all night. You half expect to see another scroll waiting by the door, or a slave from Gaius Marcellus's house standing ominously by your mat like a nightmare and come to life. But no. There's just silence, interrupted only by the sound of Lucius arguing with a chicken in the courtyard. You don't ask, you've learned to stop asking. Quintus appears soon after, tossing you a small cloth bundle. Inside, dried figs, a half-loaf of coarse bread, and, this is new, a folded note in tidy Latin. You recognise the handwriting. Gaius again. The note is brief, almost lazy in tone. "Tonight. Dinner. My house. Bring nothing. Eat light." You stare at it for a moment, wondering how many ways this could go wrong. So far, dinner with powerful Romans hasn't exactly been a calming experience. You kill the day trying to stay out of sight. You stroll through the quieter parts of the forum, duck into a bathhouse, pretend to read a scroll in the library while actually just eavesdropping on 2 senators who are arguing about whether the gods prefer goat or pig. You don't care. You'd sacrifice a box of Pop-Tarts right now if it would make the gods go easy on you. By sunset, you're walking through the familiar gates of Gaius's villa again. This time, though, there's tension in the air. The guards are more alert, the torches burn higher, and the slaves move quickly, heads down. Something's brewing. Gaius greets you in the atrium, already reclined on a cushioned couch, sipping wine. He gestures for you to sit across from him. "You met the Emperor," he says flatly. You nod. "I delivered your message." "And?" You hesitate. "He read it. Told me if I understood it, he'd kill me." Gaius smiles at that, like someone complimented his sword technique. He liked the phrasing, then. You lean forward slightly. "What was the message?" Gaius sips. "A suggestion, a proposal, and a reminder." You wait, but that's all he gives you. He waves toward the door. "Eat. I'll explain." Dinner arrives. Not extravagant, roast duck, lentils, bread, but deliberate. There's no feast atmosphere, no conversation. Just the occasional glance exchanged between Gaius and his scribe, who sits at the corner of the room, scribbling notes with practiced indifference. It's tense. It feels like the part of the movie where someone gets poisoned. After the plates are cleared, Gaius finally speaks. "Arminius Claudius is dead." You blink. "What?" "Choked on a date at a dinner party. Witnesses say he turned purple." You stare at him. Gaius shrugs. "Maybe it was an accident." You do not believe him. Historical fact, Roman assassinations weren't all daggers and back alleys. Poison was a favourite, especially at dinner. There were specialists for it, often women, and some poisons mimic natural causes so well that an investigation wouldn't even be considered unless someone powerful wanted one. His inquiry against me, Gaius says. Dead with him. You try to keep your face neutral. Try to pretend this is just a casual conversation about murder and not a dinner date with the puppet master of your worst-case scenario. But he sees through it. You're wondering if I had him killed, he says. You shrug. I'm wondering what I'm sitting in the middle of. He leans forward, setting down his cup. You're sitting in the middle of Rome, he says. This is how it works. Power protects itself. The weak die loud, the strong die quietly. And if you're smart, you stay just useful enough to survive. There's something sharp in his voice, something final. And then the door opens again, and she walks in, Senator Arminius's daughter. The same one who saw you at the party, the one who warned you. She walks in without fear, in a deep red stola and a gold hairpiece shaped like a crescent moon. She doesn't look at you, just at Gaius. I came, she says. He nods. Good, we'll talk in the study. You sit there, unsure if you've just witnessed a conspiracy or the beginning of one. Gaius stands and turns to you. You can go now, but go. You obey, because you still like breathing. Outside, the air is cooler than it should be. You make it 3 streets before someone falls in beside you. It's the old man from the Emperor's villa. The philosopher. You don't know his name. He speaks softly. It's happening quickly now. What is? The real reason you're here? You stop walking. What do you mean? He glances around. You didn't come through time by accident. Your mouth goes dry. He continues. Not everyone forgets. Some of us remember what the world was like before, whatever it is you carry. You glance down at your satchel. Your hand goes reflexively to the hidden compartment. The phone. He doesn't press. Keep it close. They'll want it soon. Who? He walks off without answering. Fringe fact. While most Romans would have considered something like a smartphone to be pure witchcraft, a handful of natural philosophers and early experimentalists might have grasped fragments of its potential, light, heat, signals. The sort of men who toyed with steam engines centuries before their time. The sort of men the Empire made vanish. You return to the domus shaken. Quintus is already asleep. Lucius snoring gently on a chair with a cup of wine resting on his chest. You sit in the dark, trying to process what just happened. The senator is dead. His daughters switched allegiances. The Emperor knows who you are. And now someone's confirmed it. This isn't just an accident. You were brought here, or sent, and you're running out of time to figure out why. You're sitting alone in the courtyard with your hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of barley tea. Don't ask, it's worse than it sounds. When the idea hits you, it's stupid, it's desperate, and it smells like singed eyebrows and very bad decisions. But it might be your only shot. You're going to build a time machine. Okay, not a full-fledged DeLorean or spinning rings of glowing copper. You don't have the parts, the power, or the PhD. But maybe, just maybe, you can build something that gets attention. Something that reminds the right people, whoever or whatever that means now, where you came from. Something that creates a ripple big enough to reach back across the centuries. Or realities. Or however this disaster of a life works. So you begin with the one thing that survived your jump here, your phone. It's down to 1% battery now. That tiny flickering light is your last sliver of 21st century anything, and you stare at it like it might whisper answers if you blink hard enough. You pull it from beneath the floor tile in your shared sleeping room, turn it over in your hands, and power it on. It glows faintly. Icons fuzzed, screen dim, like it's dying in slow motion. You snap the only photo you can, a blurry shot of your dirt-smeared face, with a toga half on and a goat chewing straw in the background. Great. If this ends up as your last message to the future, you'll be immortalised looking like a time-travelling intern on his worst day. Then you dig into your limited knowledge of ancient batteries. You've seen YouTube videos. You remember something about lemon juice, copper plates, and iron rods. You vaguely recall a clay jar called the Baghdad battery, still debated, still mysterious, but close enough to give you a little hope. Or electrocute yourself. Honestly, it's a coin flip. You raid the kitchen with a quiet urgency. The cook Mercia tries to shoo you away until you charm her with terrible Latin and an offer to help peel garlic. She relents. You sneak out with a clay amphora, a strip of bronze from a broken lamp, some spare nails, and a handful of vinegary wine that could probably dissolve marble. Historical fact time. The so-called Baghdad battery is one of the great maybe devices in history. Some say it was used for electroplating, others say it was just a storage jar with metal bits. No one knows for sure, but under the right conditions, a clay vessel filled with acidic fluid and a copper-iron pair can produce a small electric charge. You retreat to the garden, where Quintus is dozing, and Lucius is too drunk to question anything that doesn't bite him. You fill the amphora with the wine, drop in your makeshift electrodes and wait. A few minutes pass. You connect the corroded leads to your phone's charger cable, rigged together with fraying linen soaked in olive oil to act like a wire. You press the power button. Nothing. You whisper some modern profanity. Then you try again. The screen flickers, just for a second. A flicker. A brief, gasping moment of blue-white light, like a lightning bug giving you the thumbs up before dying. But it was something. You're not sure whether to cry, laugh, or scream, so you just sit there, shoulders shaking, hands trembling. The glow fades again, but it proves one thing: energy can work here, now, you can do more. Fringe fact. Ancient scholars had some idea about electricity, static from amber, shocks from electric fish, but they didn't understand it as a system. It was mystical, dangerous, and rare. You're the first idiot in Rome trying to bootstrap a tech renaissance with garbage and vibes. Later that night, after stashing your battery jar beneath a loose tile, you sit quietly on the roof. The stars are viciously bright. There's no light pollution, no planes, no buzzing of transformers, just the low hum of a city pretending it isn't built on blood and rumours. You hear Quintus climb up behind you. "You didn't set anything on fire today," he says. "Should I be worried?" You smile. Not yet. He sits beside you, handing over a cup of wine, the decent kind this time. "I saw the senator's daughter," he says after a pause. That gets your attention. "When?" "This morning, near the Temple of Vesta. She didn't see me, but she was speaking to someone I didn't recognize." He pulls a face. "Something's coming." You nod. "I can feel it too." "You still think about going back?" he asks. It's a fair question. You've been here long enough now to have scars, both literal and emotional. You've learned to eat food with your hands, to duck when people shout barbarous, and to never trust a toga with too many folds. But you also miss flush toilets, and deodorant, and people who don't believe sneezing is a sign from the gods. "I think," you say slowly, "that I'm stuck between two times, one I don't belong in, and one I can't return to." He nods. "That sounds about right." Then he adds, "If you figure out how to go back, would you take anyone with you?" That question sits heavy between you. You don't answer, not because you don't know, but because you do. The next morning Gaius sends for you again. No letter this time, just a boy with quick feet and faster eyes, whispering that your presence is urgently required. You arrive at his villa to find the place buzzing, not panicked exactly, but close. Servants move briskly, guards whisper into corners. Gaius himself greets you wearing a deep blue tunic and a look that says someone's going to die by dinner. "The Emperor wants a demonstration," he says without preamble. You blink. "Of what?" "Of you." Your stomach does something unnatural. "He heard rumours," Gaius continues. "Whispers of light from clay jars, energy from nothing, foreign tools. He thinks you're a magician or an oracle. Or worse, something he can use." You can't breathe for a second. "How?" "You'll show him," Gaius says. "Your battery trick. Whatever else you have. And you'll smile while doing it." "And if I refuse?" He gives you the flattest look in Rome. "Then he'll come to you. And it won't be a request. So here it is, the moment you've been crawling towards since the day you landed in this city. You're going to show the Emperor of Rome that you're not just another barbarian. You're going to show him a piece of the future, and hope he doesn't destroy you for it." You spend the morning pacing through Gaius Marcellus's villa, like a man awaiting either glory or public dismemberment. Outside, the sun is blistering, but you barely notice it. Your thoughts are looping in chaotic spirals. Should I show him the phone, just the battery? What if he thinks I'm a god? What if he thinks I'm a demon? You've prepared nothing close to a script. You've only got a half-functional ancient battery, a smartphone with maybe 0.8% life left, and a gut full of bad wine and worse choices. Gaius has provided you with a fresh tunic, black, finely stitched, and a little too dramatic for your liking. "To make you look mysterious," he said. "It mostly just makes you sweat in places you didn't know could sweat. You're bathed, combed and rubbed with oil until you smell like an overripe fig. A guard hands you the clay amphora containing your makeshift battery, now strapped into a wooden box lined with straw. It hums faintly. You swear you can feel it. Or maybe it's just your own nerves. At midday, a sleek black litter arrives, carried by men with arms the size of amphorae. Gaius doesn't accompany you. This part is yours, he says, handing you a small bronze token marked with the imperial seal. Give this to the guard at the door. It'll get you in. You sure it'll get me out, you mutter? He doesn't answer. You're taken through the eastern gates of the city and into the hills beyond the Aventine, where the Emperor's private villa lies nestled among cypress trees and sun-scorched marble paths. It's quieter here, calm in the way wild animals are just before they strike. The guards don't greet you. They don't even speak. One just gestures with his spear toward the central courtyard. You walk in, and the Emperor is already there. He's seated beneath a tall cedar arbour, surrounded by low couches, bowls of fruit, and a handful of scribes who glance at you like you're something scraped off their sandals. He looks much the same as before, calm, calculating, the kind of man who watches other men squirm for sport. You've brought something, he says. You nod and kneel, placing the amphora gently at his feet. It's all very ceremonial, very hush-hush. The scribes stop writing. The breeze seems to pause. He leans forward. Explain. You take a breath so deep your ribs ache. It's a device of sorts. It stores energy. Not fire, not wind, but power. The Emperor's eyes narrow. Power for what? You glance around. To awaken another device. He gestures. Show me. You reach into your tunic and pull out the phone. It's wrapped in a piece of cloth like a relic or a very fancy fruit. You unwrap it slowly and feel your heartbeat pound behind your eyes. You tap the button, the screen glows. It's dim, flickering, but unmistakable. A rectangle of light. Gasps ripple from the scribes. One stumbles backward. Another whispers something that sounds a lot like demonium. The Emperor just watches, silent, unblinking. You flip to the last photo, your face awkward and stunned with a goat in the background. He stares, then he laughs. Not a mad laugh, not a cruel one, just amused. Is that you? You nod. You look terrified. Accurate, you say. He gestures for you to hand it over. Your fingers freeze around the device, but something in his expression dares you to disobey. So slowly you extend the phone. He holds it like it's made of glass and lightning. He tilts it, taps it, watches the light dance across the screen. Then he hands it back without ceremony. What else can it do? You hesitate. Not much. Its power is nearly gone. Can you make more power? Maybe, but I need more time, materials, copper, iron, acid. I can build another. He leans back. You can teach this? I can try. Here's your historical fact. Emperors, at least the smart ones, loved innovation when it made them look smarter, richer, or stronger. But they also feared what they didn't understand, and Tiberius banned certain types of glass. Domitian hunted astrologers. Nero burned down his own city and blamed a cult. The fine line between curiosity and execution has always depended on the ruler's mood. The Emperor's mood apparently is intrigued. I don't think you're a god, he says. You bleed too easily. You nod, not sure if that's a compliment or a threat. But I think you're valuable, and in Rome value lives for a time. You exhale slowly. Then he adds, which is why I'm placing you under the protection of the palace. You blink. What? You'll remain in Rome, work here, under supervision. That word, supervision, has the warmth of chains. The scribes begin taking notes again. The Emperor rises. You may go, my guards will escort you. You don't know what to feel. Relief, terror. You've just gone from anonymous foreigner to imperial project, like a pet or a specimen. You're taken back to the city, this time with more guards, more stairs, and a quiet understanding that you are no longer free in any meaningful way. When you return to Quintus's house, he's waiting in the atrium, pacing like a man about to receive bad news. He stops when he sees you. Well? You hold up the phone. It worked. He exhales hard and pulls you into a rough embrace. You don't even resist this time. You just close your eyes and stand there breathing in the smell of sweat, dust, and the faintest trace of citrus soap. Lucius wanders in, holding a half-eaten fig. Are we dead? Not yet, you mumble. You sit together that night in the courtyard. No torches, no wine, just silence, interrupted only by the occasional murmur of Rome settling into sleep. You look up at the stars and realise for the first time that your story isn't just about surviving anymore. It's about changing the narrative, or at least making sure you don't get erased from it.